Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
To Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much. It is a very, very special night tonight as the Honourable Larry Maguire, Member of Parliament in the Canadian parliamentary system from Brandon-Souris in Manitoba, is with us to talk UAP. We will get to him momentarily, but first, let's say hello to everybody in our YouTube chat room tonight. We have Race Fan in the gold medal position. John Doe taking home the silver with Fab 22, taking home a bronze medal tonight. Mark Longoria, Grandpa Holland in Australia. Good to see you. Roy Boy, how you doing this morning? Thanks for coming on in. Downshift over in Dutchland. Hank, how you doing, my friend? We got the world here tonight listening to our great Larry Maguire here. Awesome Ann Palmer, good to see you. Jules, nice to have you here. Carbine's right, thanks for coming on in. Ann B, good to have you here. As we continue on with roll call, Dennis Zuniga is here, a good veteran out of the United States, and we say he'll be signing autographs after the show. Line up to the left of the studio, if you don't mind, to the left of the studio. Smithy, Wes H., good to see you here. Thank you for coming on in. Science Bob, always a pleasure to have you here. Matthew Kennedy, Jeffrey DeRuin in Texas, thanks for coming on in. John Hinojosa, welcome back as we continue on with roll call. Worsley, nice to have you here. And who else is here? Human Carl, he is here. Another great veteran of the United States. And we love our veterans around here. You'll always have a safe home here in our chat room. Human Carl, by the way, will be signing autographs after the show as well. Line up to the right of the studio, to the right of the studio. There's Robert Lamoth, Black Dragon, another great veteran of the United States Marine Corps. And we continue on. Science Melinda from Australia. Nice to see you. Doug Shelby is here. The Doug Shelby has arrived, which means we can officially start the show. D. Cohen in D.C., how you doing? Thank you for joining us. Man, we got a spread out crowd tonight. Stu Gerson, good to have you here. And who else is joining us here? Let's take a look. Dirty Filth in Edmonton, welcome back. And my music maker fan, how are you? Glenn Dannison, thanks for coming on in as we continue on with our roll call. Vinman in Manitoba, welcome back, buddy. Good to see you. Marty Burback, E.T. God, welcome. Grantavius in Oregon, Far Flung. Benji, Robert Garcia over in Europe, welcome back. Alien Critter, Digger Dog, Obi Flett, GFG in Toronto, nice to have you here. Thank you for coming on in. Asteroid, good to see you, my friend, as we continue on. George Hernandez, thanks for joining us. Lisa Compton, nice to have you here. And Sally, thank you so much for kicking off the Super Chat tonight. The Super Chat is a wonderful way to support what we do on Spaced Out Radio on a nightly basis. So thank you so much. Laura, the Paranormal Pixie, good to see you. And who else is here? Henry X, thanks for coming on in. Stu Gerson, Ken Brett, I know you're in Canada somewhere, but thank you so much. Let me know where you are, Ken. I would really appreciate that if you don't mind. Thank you so much for that awesome super chat, as we got about a minute to go before we are going to launch this rocket tonight. Carbine's right. Thanks for coming on in. And I think we're caught up so far. Oh, there's Desert Rat. You snuck in. And let's see here. Who else is here? 416 Bitcoin in Toronto. Good to have you here. Noble Patrick, thanks for coming on in. And let's get the radio side started. Numbers lock. There we go. All right, that started. And Jazzy Small, welcome back. Science Bob, thank you so much for that super chat, my friend. We really do appreciate it. And we're going to get rocking and rolling here in about 45 seconds. We have a wonderful, wonderful guest tonight. Member of Parliament, Larry Maguire, here from the Conservative Party of Canada, and his riding out of Brandon-Souris, Manitoba. We love having him here. Avi M., nice to have you here. Northern Alabama Cryptid, nice to see you. Thank you for coming. Oh, Ken, you're in Coquitlam. Oh, you're nice and close. You're within driving distance. Uncle Dale and his Power Stash are here. Remember, if you see Uncle Dale in Austin, Texas, rub his Power Stash for good luck right through July 4th. And we got about 10 seconds here, people. We're going to get this thing going. It is a huge night here on Spaced Out Radio. Hour 1, Larry Maguire, and then a panel breaking everything down in Hour 2. Mark Ellens, how you doing? Horns up. Let's rock. From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on Odyssey Radio, TalkStream Live, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Join us at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot. Read Sharky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. We are doing things a little bit different tonight from our normal format. Tonight, we get our first deep look into UFOs and their existence in Canadian airspace. With most of the focus in the United States, Conservative Party member and a member of Parliament, the Honourable Larry Maguire, has taken the lead into introducing UAP to the Canadian government and the citizens at large. Tonight, we are going to take a serious look at UFOs over Canada. Where are the reports going? Are Canada's nuclear energy facilities being affected by this phenomena? Are other politicians and political parties on board for studying this subject? We have Mr. Maguire for the first hour of this show. Then in hour number 2, we will be joined by some experts in the UFO field who are closely following the Canadian government regarding UAP to break it down for the next couple of hours. So let's get right to it. Member of Parliament for Brandon-Souris in Manitoba, Mr. Larry Maguire, thank you so much for coming on into Spaced Out Radio. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be here, Dave. You've obviously got Spaced Out Radio going well. Your slogan, "We own the night." I'm looking forward to your interview and the opportunity to provide a little bit more information for your guests. I was going to say when you're doing the intro there, this isn't just a national or a North American show. You've got folks on here from, as I was listening and your intro, Australia and England. So, I mean, this is a pretty international event.
It really is, and it really goes to show how important this topic is, not only in North America, but worldwide. I mean, Larry, I want to start with you right off the bat. You're a good old farm boy from the province of Manitoba. Manitoba is close to me. My mother is born in Manitoba, and a good, healthy Mennonite lady who is, hanging on out, but now living in BC. But I want to ask you, did you ever think after 20 plus years in politics that you would be the UFO guy?
You got to be kidding. No, I never gave that a thought until about 5 years ago. I got interested in a front page New York Times article in 2017 that talked about UAPs on the front page. So, as I said earlier, I've harvested a lot of nighttime harvesting hours and seen a lot of stars. But out in southwest Manitoba, I must admit I may have seen a few shooting stars, but nothing that I would identify as an unidentified aerial phenomena. But after what I've seen in reports from the U.S., it's and that article that I first saw then, and having heard about them all my life, we got pretty interested in it.
I take this step. Why was this important for you over the last few years to try and get to this point where you felt it was necessary about a month and a half ago now to bring it in front of one of your standing committees on nuclear energy?
Well, a few of us here have been following the happenings in the United States, I guess, with all of this. We've been interviewed with a few that we'll get into later, but it's important, I think, that the United States isn't the one tackling this by themselves. We are these items, as your listeners are here, they're everywhere, and so they don't honor borders. They can be anywhere, and we don't know what they are. And I think it's very important that the objective here should be to have an unbiased group to find out what the intent and the objective of these items are.
When you started getting interested in this topic, how did you decide over time that you were going to get not only members of your Conservative Party of Canada in on this subject, but to try and bring this subject to the forefront of Parliament Hill?
Yeah. Well, it takes some time. You got to talk to a lot of people. There's a lot of stigma attached to this in many years in the past. But when people like top military leaders come out in the United States and start talking about these things publicly, about having reports done by Congress, passing legislation, we can get into that later too, uh, you know, to bring this to the forefront of the American public, but particularly even those are unclassified, but even classified reports to Congress itself. I think that was really led me to believe that there's more to this than fiction, and we need to be able to be a part of that here in Canada as well. We know that our defense minister was briefed on it a year ago, and I think it should be more public here as well in a particular unbiased manner.
Now, when you get into a topic like this, I mean, you have to go through the Little Green Men and the X Files and Twilight Zone, people teasing you and everything like that. How much torment did you get before people started taking you seriously?
I guess ET was pretty popular too. But anyway, no, I've had really no skepticism because people are following the happenings in the United States. I mean, we just on the 17th of May here, we had a congressional hearing, first one on this topic in 50 years, Dave. That shows how much more acceptable it is to hear it. They said they had something like 144 sightings, and now all of a sudden it's up to 400. So is that because they're not afraid to talk about it anymore, or is it just that we've got better tracking mechanism and we can see more? I think there's a little bit of both maybe, but that's just where we're at today.
On a personal level, why is this topic important to you? Does it scare you? Because this does affect 7.8 billion people on this world.
Well, that's interesting. I'm not afraid of it. I mean, if I hadn't have done anything with it, they would still be there and somebody else would have had to pick it up. I guess I'm looking at it from just a purely interest point of view. And I believe that, some of the sightings that have been had around some of the facilities, the thousands of reports, there's some pretty credible people that have been involved with this. I mean, the legislation in the United States was brought forward by two opposing senators, if you want to put it that way. Senator Gillibrand, a Democrat from New York, and Senator Rubio, a renowned Republican from Florida, both put an amendment into a bill that provided for the opportunity to and some funding to be able to put this into a report that was going to be studied by U.S. Senate with a report going to Congress. And so at that level, but then also Lou Elizondo was an intelligence person with the U.S. military, and being on the inside of that for decades, he felt there needed to be more publicity around this himself, and that it should be made more public so that it took away the stigma from American citizens. And so he even left the military to get into an organization to help make that more public. And Christopher Mellon was in there, with the intelligence agency in the United States itself. And I've talked to others as well.
Well, let's get deep into this conversation now as we talk with Member of Parliament Larry Maguire for Brandon-Souris in Manitoba, part of the Conservative Party. You were the first in your party to really dig into this. You now have a number of your fellow Conservative Party members involved with this, including Raquel Dancho, who is looking into the RCMP portion of this story and what happens with reports from there. Were you surprised to learn how scatterbrained UFO reports were in Canada, from the Department of National Defense to Transport Canada to NAV Canada? I mean, there really doesn't seem to be anything that is centralized.
Well, also the Canadian Air Defense Sector, the RCMP, as you mentioned earlier as well, RCAF, and these are credible military personnel, pilots, majors in our Army, in our military, Air Force, and I just think that the credibility of the individuals is what has attacked my intrigue, I guess, if you want to put it that way, to become more public with us.
How important is it for this subject to maybe get the other parties on board? We hear the New Democratic Party's Matthew Green has taken an interest in the UAP subject. Have we heard from the sitting Liberal Party whether or not they have any interest regarding UFOs?
I asked a question, as I said earlier, back, about a month ago or a month and a half ago. It just kind of came up in natural discussion. I'm the vice chair of the Natural Resources Committee of Canada here, and in the course of that meeting, we were dealing with some of the topics, and as we transition from where we are today into whatever will be in 2050 for energy sources, and nuclear was one of the big ones that came up, and we were talking about sightings around some of our nuclear plants. That intrigued me as well. It was something I didn't think that I'd ever have an opportunity to bring up, but I asked the Assistant Deputy Minister here in Canada of Natural Resources what they could tell us about that, and we even gave them a copy of the U.S. legislation that was put before Congress and passed, and we didn't receive a lot. They didn't pass that on to our nuclear safety group, but security commission, I should say. But we got a reply back in writing from the questions that I wrote again to him to make sure, which was a bit innocuous. It didn't have a lot of detail to it. And so I'm still pursuing that. We've got an official party position on this as well, with the objective of identifying origins and intent of UAPs, pardon me. And it based on the fact that our closest ally and NORAD partner continues to investigate the national security implications of a UAP. And so I think it'd be prudent for Canada to take a similar approach. And so rather than just, ridicule and silence on these issues, I think it'd be wise to take this issue seriously with that objective of determining what the origin and intent is, and find out what the efforts should be undertaken to investigate and make those findings more public in a responsible manner.
Is it possible that in the near future, within the next couple of years, we could see a UAP task force formed in Canada to look into sites, whether it's from the military, NAV Canada, CSIS, or your regular citizen who spots a UFO over the prairies or over the mountains of British Columbia?
Well, I think, I've made a suggestion that it be done in a press release that I put out, that our chief science advisor, Dr. Neiman, should be the one to tackle this. Then the defense wouldn't feel encumbered by it. They'd be called and we could call whoever we wanted as witness. Now in Canada, and as a different system than the United States, so as opposition members here, we can't put forward ideas that cost the government money and motions and committee work, but we can study things in committee. And I think that's an important place to have this discussion take place. But I think it has to go further than that. It has to have a parallel to what the U.S. just did in this congressional hearing and the announcement last week, and that is to say that they will set up an independent body, and they're in the process of putting someone in charge of it, so that all of the information is gathered in one place and can be made public. And I think that that takes the stigma and any concerns away from from that topic, that side of it, and our science advisor would be a good person to do that, in my estimation.
How important is it, though, for today's politicians and today's Canadians to learn about the history of this topic? I mean, 1967 was very important in this subject because you had Shag Harbour, Nova Scotia, the event that happened there. You also had earlier that year the Falcon Lake incident that happened. I mean, there's a lot that has been going on in Canada ever since, uh, the
Hmm.
1940s and 50s, where Wilbur Smith was literally the top guy in North
Yeah.
America looking into this subject. We do have a proud history of investigating unidentified aerial phenomena.
Yeah, we do, and I think one of the people that I've spoken with is a gatherer of these informations, I guess you could say, that lives right in Winnipeg, Chris Rutkowski. And he has done a tremendous amount of work in regards to this. Is very well known in that field in Canada. With Robert Powell from the SCU, as well as Dr. Hal Puthoff that I've spoken to in the CSU as well. Um, you SCU, the Scientific Coalition,
Yes.
but you're familiar. And so I think with these kinds of people and looking into it and already gathering the information, to answer your question, there's lots of sightings out there in Canada, as well as the plethora of them in the United States that have been going on for decades. It would appear like, at least. But the main thing that I think needs to be done here is to correlate the information in one place and have it out, and then that takes away the stigma from politicians or anyone else, not to decide what they actually, you know, what might be on people's minds as what they may believe is in them, but to find out what actually the intent and the objective is.
Do you think that everybody can come together regarding this subject in Canada, parliament wise and party wise, in order to take this seriously to develop what needs to be developed?
Well, yeah, I certainly do. I mean, as you mentioned with the New Democrat member, basically they're backing the idea of studying it. We know that the defense minister from a year ago, Mr. Sajjan, was briefed on this. Don't know whether the prime minister or the present defense minister have been, but I know that the deputy minister of natural resources knows about it because we've asked those questions, and I think it's pertinent that we do look at going back in that history. Like you mentioned, Falcon Lake in '67, they even minted a coin after that one in Canada, and so I think it's pretty relevant that we've got these situations that have arisen in our side of the border as well as in the U.S., and we should be sharing information in regards to those areas as we are allies through NORAD, as I mentioned.
Now, from what I had learned, our former ambassador to the United States actually was able to brief the prime minister back in 2019 when this subject first came out. David McNaughton was the person at that time. Have you ever heard anything about David McNaughton briefing the prime minister, Justin Trudeau, regarding this subject?
Well, I knew of it, but we've seen an order paper on that, but there's been no response.
Do you think the prime minister is dodging this subject regarding the UAP?
Well, I don't know what he knows about it, so I wouldn't be able to answer that. It's just not. They haven't made it public. They haven't talked about it, so I have to assume that they're uh, not ready to do that yet. And so all I'm trying to do is parallel to what the U.S. has done already, just get this in the forefront a little bit more, so people can talk about it. It's probably well, the main thing I think tonight is just to have an opportunity with you to be able to get this message out there.
Have you had an opportunity to talk to any of the high profile American politicians, whether it's Marco Rubio or Kristen Gillibrand or Tim Burchett or Mike Gallagher, regarding this subject?
I haven't spoken to them personally, no, but I've seen the work that they've done, and I have talked to Dr. Puthoff and Chris, and there's others here in Canada. But I think that it's the work I think that's being done that's the most important part here, and I take my hat off to Ms. Gillibrand and Mr. Rubio for getting that amendment forward, getting it passed in Congress, and for providing an unclassified and a classified report on that are already out.
Should this subject remain classified in Canada?
Well, I think that's why I'm here. I'm trying to make it much more public. And I think that there's a certain level of, and I don't know what they have for information. So I'm just going to say that I think there needs to be we want to make sure that that the information that's put on the table is coming from areas that they've done study in already, and deal with the information that's before us so that they can have acceptable information that the public can, even guys like myself, can absorb. But there's been some pretty phenomenal sightings, some supersonic speed opportunities, I guess you could say, in these areas for the speed of some of these vehicles or whatever they are, and unidentified aerial phenomena, I guess, is the best way to describe them. But some of the things that the U.S. has in regards to the speeds, the following of radar on these items are certainly nothing that our present U.S. government is aware of, and they believe that it's it's either something completely out of the realm of where we're at, or it is something that is unexplainable and believed to be not made by any country on Earth yet.
Have you talked to any Canadian fighter pilots who have intercepted any of these craft or tried to intercept and learned what they have learned, or has that been off limits so far?
I haven't talked to them, no. And I think that that's the kind of thing that would come out if we were to have this in a committee. Then, Dave, I think it would be very fruitful, because then we can call very credible witnesses forward and give them an opportunity to, say their piece.
Do you think that Canadian hearings could be a part of the future regarding this subject? I mean, considering if you look at the list, you have a plethora of knowledge in Chris Rutkowski, Grant Cameron, Victor Vigiani, Paul Kingsbury, who you met with the SCU, and many others regarding this phenomena.
Yeah, I think there could be. I mean, these people have been, as I said, working on this for years, and we need, the witnesses we could bring before a hearing, which is what I call a committee, don't all have to be Canadians either. So we'd have to get clearance to bring them in, and they could tell us what they can, and whatever's classified and they can't talk about, well, then we have to ask the right questions. And I think that was one of the concerns of some of the topics that came out of the congressional hearing of just May the 17th.
Now, we got about just under 90 seconds to go before we have to go to break at the bottom of the hour. Member of Parliament, the Honourable Larry Maguire, here on Spaced Out Radio tonight. What have you learned personally that shocked you about this subject?
Well, I think the fact that Mr. Elizondo has indicated that there are objects. He hasn't elaborated, but I think that's in itself quite something. And to see some of the videos that they put in that 90-minute congressional hearing, and then they say that what they showed us is just the beginning of what they have, I think it certainly raises the curiosity.
Well, when we come back from the break, I really want to get into your conversations, because you have had a couple of deep meetings regarding this subject. And I would love if you could open up on these as much as you possibly can regarding your meetings with Lou Elizondo, Hal Puthoff, the SCU, because it's important that the public finds out what is going on across Canada regarding the UAP phenomena. Yes, this isn't just an American thing. This is a Canadian thing. This is a Brazilian problem. This is a United Kingdom problem. It's a world issue that has to come out. And we are very proud tonight to have from the Member of Parliament of the Canadian Conservative Party, the Honourable Larry Maguire, here on Spaced Out Radio. More UAP talk with UFOs in Canadian politics. Let's get into it when we return on the mighty SOR. Stay tuned. The second half hour is next. I'm not going to lie. I'm having a lot of fun here. I am having a lot of fun. I hope you are too.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, Dave. It sure is.
The audience is loving this so far too.
Well, it's a pretty interesting topic. It's much more than interesting.
Well, you know what? I'm just glad that it's finally coming out. I really am. And I'm very excited about it. I mean, being up here, being an experiencer of sightings and everything like that, I think it's about time, and I think it's really, really brave that you've tackled this. Now, I don't know whether that's because you're passionate about it, or you figure, you know what, let's throw a wrench in things, or whatever it may be. But it's awesome. I think it's great.
I think it's more passion than trying to throw a wrench in things. As I said, I will answer your question more clearly. I believe it's imperative that this be done in a non-biased manner, and it should be one of the least partisan things I think that Parliament can deal with. We can get into that later too.
No kidding. I mean, because it is, no matter what you do, this has to be bipartisan. Like it's not one side or the other. It has to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree.
All right. Well, we already got in trouble from one of our American listeners because they're like a half hour into two Canadians on an interview and not one A yet. So I guess we got to talk some hockey. Did you watch the game last night?
I must admit I didn't see much of it. I saw up and down there was an awful lot of goals scored again, and for Colorado to come out one up, I guess that was a good deal for them. But yeah, it was you'd think Edmonton was right out of it. Then I always said, as long as Draisaitl and McDavid are on the ice, the game's never over, and I almost proved it again last night. But McKinnon's an awesome hockey player too.
Oh my God! And that Cale Makar on defense for Colorado, that kid's the next Chris Pronger type player.
Goalie,
maybe a Scott Niedermayer. But I'll tell you, I think Edmonton in 6. I'm going with Edmonton in 6. I'm feeling Edmonton in 6. God, I hope, because
I hope you're right.
Oh, me too. Me too. I could use. I've been a diehard Oilers fan since 1979.
Yeah.
So I was like 7 years old the first time I saw Gretzky on TV, and I was like, "Oh my gosh! Like this is incredible, absolutely."
If Grant Fuhr's listening, I'll be back for another round of golf. Put it that way.
You have to be. You got it. Oh. And comment here from Robert to you. Hats off to you from the USA. A lot of Americans are excited about you, Larry. We got most of our listeners, about 70% of our listeners, believe it or not, are American. And they're happy to see Canada finally getting into this. And it's all because of you.
Well, we wanted to bring it forward. I just got such an interest in it when even though we saw that New York Times article 5 years ago, well, nothing was being done, and there's lots of books out and that kind of stuff. I haven't even read most of those, but I think the big thing is that when the politicians in the States, being one myself up here, started to, put legislation in place to deal with it, that's, we can talk about that too, but that's what piqued my interest in it.
Right. Okay. Hardest question of the night I'm going to ask you. The toughest question. What is your thoughts on or rules on eating breakfast foods for dinner? We ask every first-time guest this question.
Oh, never thought much of it, but being an old farm boy, porridge looks pretty good any time of the day.
Okay, I'll give you porridge. God, I haven't had a good porridge since my grandma made it, man. I got one of them big husky Ukrainian grandmas from Vegreville.
Well, for all of our American friends, I love Canadian back bacon too, but the eggs are pretty popular. So, yeah, no, it's one of my favorite meals of the day, and I can pretty well eat it any time of the day.
Oh well, I have an aversion to eating breakfast foods for dinner, but that's just me. I just want to say a big thank you to Human Carl, Bob, Ken, and Sally for the great super chats tonight. It's a wonderful way to support what we do on this show. We got a number of veterans in our chat room tonight. We want to say hello to all of you. You always have a safe home here in our chat room on Spaced Out Radio, and all of our regulars who are tuned on in. We very much appreciate you guys coming on in as well. We have Larry here for another half an hour. Then we got a very special panel coming up for you in hours 2 and 3. Here we go with the second half hour. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dave Scott, coming to you from the beautiful mountains of British Columbia. I want to remind you that you can check out our free archives at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio or on any podcast network. Also, our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on the conversation tonight. Member of Parliament Larry Maguire, the Honourable one from Brandon-Souris in Manitoba, part of the Conservative Party of Canada, looking into UFOs. And sir, back on February 21st of 2021, you had a very, very important conversation with Luis Elizondo, the former head of the ATIP program at the Pentagon, regarding UAP. Are you able to tell us what that conversation was all about?
Yeah, sure am. No, I didn't learn any classified information. That the topics that I talked with Lou on were things that are already out in the public venue, but it was really interesting to hear his discussions on some of the sightings and topics. And I guess, some of the things that struck me the most is that he said these aren't all what we'd call as traditional flying objects, because they don't have any kind of combustion engines or leaving streams or trails behind them. They didn't leave any associated signatures that an aircraft does, and yet they were traveling at thousands of miles an hour. And the indications are that the G forces, what we can stand going into space, 8-9 Gs, that kind of stuff. And they said the Gs on these machines would be up in the 700 to 900 G force range. So that is radars picked them up. As I said, they can turn at 90 degrees without losing any speed at all. So there's nothing in the country's inventory that can withstand those Gs. So that was just some of the topics. Low Earth orbits, dropping from 28,000 feet to zero in basically 3/4 of a second. These are things that are, I think, recorded and need to be discussed in some of the hearings that they'll continue to have in the United States. I'm sure that there'll be other congressional meetings on it, just because they had one in 50 years. With the interest in this topic right now, the stigma is starting to leave it. It's okay to talk about it now, because there's presidents have talked about this. The head of the CIA and different areas have been talking about it. NASA administrators, intelligence officials, and trained military observers. These are credible people that have all been in on the recordings of these, and I think that makes the whole thing of extreme interest. That's what I've picked up from some of the conversations.
Outside of NORAD, is there any, or has there been any, sharing of information between Canada and the United States regarding UAP?
Well, that's what I want to get a hearing up here to help get into as well. We don't know that. I do know that there's been, the reports back and forth have been read by both sides, I'm sure. They know that there's been sightings here. We know that there's sightings there in the United States. I think we need to work together on this, and that's why I want to get a parallel opportunity set up here. Nobody's taken this on other than myself here before in Canada, and I think it's high time that we did. The people like Mr. Rutkowski have got over 1,000 what would I say, dossiers, basically sightings that have been reported to him here as a person of interest to collect these interests so far in Canada. But I still think that our chief science advisor would be a really good person to coordinate everything with. And then, because we're working together through NORAD and other intelligence mechanisms anyway, and our trade is so great with our American neighbors, it just stands to reason that we look at this at least on a North American basis.
Okay, so the fact that we don't know if there is other talks going on that we know of at this time, would you say that because we are the United States' closest allies and they are to us, that we need to have some sort of cross-border understanding of UAP?
Well, I would certainly think that would be an objective. I mean, I grew up in southern Manitoba, right in the middle of Canada here, about 35 miles off the American border and 2 hours away from the Minot Air Force Base in middle of North Dakota's northern border, and the military, the missiles that were in the put in there in the 60s. There's been rumors of them being disabled by some of these sightings, and we don't know the details of that. I think there's a lot of things that are still to be learned by all of us. And I think the only way we can do that fully in our own context here is to share that information between both countries.
Okay, now recently you took a tour of Canada's nuclear energy facilities since
Yeah.
we do not have any nuclear missiles in Canada. And you recently brought up in a standing committee about UAP being seen over the nuclear facilities. When you were touring around Ontario at these facilities, did you bring up the questions of unidentified aerial phenomena or drones uh, coming over the facilities and hovering or being spotted around them?
We were there just to look at the types of plants that we have with the CANDU reactors in Bruce, which is Bruce Nuclear, which is the largest nuclear plant in North America, and to look at how they manage their disposals of the rods that they have and the energy that comes from nuclear. And I think those were the main things that we were dealing with. And I didn't bring it up there, but I did bring it up with our um, security, the Canadian nuclear security folks on a call that I had with them directly, and that's when we got the Deputy Minister of Natural Resources involved.
Do you think that this is cause for concern if unidentified aerial phenomena are being seen over nuclear facilities at this time?
Well, we don't have any indication that there'd be any harm done by it. We don't know whether there's any defense alerts to be had here or not. There's certainly been nothing to show that there is at this point here in Canada. There's been sightings, and it's interesting that they are in those areas. But there's been a number of sightings there, and not particularly in that one, but in our nuclear facilities. And so I think that those are that's just a real big part of why I want the objective of this to be to find out what the origin and the intent of these are.
Have any of them that we know about been caught on tape?
Well, I think that the congressional hearing had sightings right in its own videos that they had at the hearing, and one of the things that you know that they've talked about is the physiological effects of UAP, and they make special notes. This new office that they've put together of testing materials to gain as much knowledge as possible on the origin and intent. So that would lead me to believe that they have something.
Could those, if videos are filmed, because I'm going to assume that security states that there's video cameras all over these nuclear facilities, could it be that we could see videos come out at some point?
Well, we asked for details on that. Was certainly one of the questions that I had for our Canadian Nuclear Security Commission, and we didn't get, like how far away you've got extensive surveillance equipment around these types of plants, and we didn't get a clear answer as to how far that would go, how near to a plant it would be before they considered it a concern, and those are unanswered questions at this point.
All
But
right, let's
definitely,
move over.
but definitely questions I think that need to be answered.
That would be very interesting. And you know what? We're going to push for that. Sometimes a
Mm,
little journalistic digging can
yep.
come a little bit long way. And I think the pressure of the mainstream media may be able to get something out if they ever, outside of CTV News, jump on this subject matter.
Well, and I've talked about Chris Rutkowski here in Canada, and the new committee that'll be set up in the U.S. But we've also got you know reports here in Canada, the documented evidence outlining what Department of National Defense reports in their own internal um, unidentified aerial phenomena information, and that includes NORAD's information through what we have as one Canada Air Division in Winnipeg and the Aerospace Control and Warning Squadron in North Bay, Ontario. So those are two more areas of information gathering, uh, and I think the more we delve into this, the more information that we could get in a very good committee hearing, even if it's only 2 or 3 meetings, to have discussions from witnesses and then maybe talk to some of our own bureaucrats after that. Once we've heard from the people who have actually got the information to deal with it.
Why do you think this subject is so important for Canadians to learn about this? What is it about this subject that Canadians should know?
Well, I think it's just a curiosity from this point of view, but we need to know if it's a defense, something that we should be worried about in defense as well. I think it's only just common sense to think that if there's something in the space that we're not aware of, that it's not maybe a defense concern on something that might happen in the ground, but we've got a lot of flights flying today, and some of these pilots have seen um, objects flying along beside them, that sort of thing, and you know certainly we don't want to have any accidents up there,
I-
and so I think that's a curiosity as well.
In a Canadian sense, because it's going to be much different than the United States way of doing it, what does disclosure mean to you?
Yeah, just putting all your cards on the table. I think if you're going to disclose something, it means you let people know what you know, and I think that's what we could learn in a committee. It's what I hope that the Americans do with their new intelligence committee that they're putting together on this, and I think it's very important that there be a chief person in charge of it, so that there isn't you know varying stories going into 2 or 3 different departments. We need to bring all of the departments together in their government and in our government, because it's not just science or defense or other ones of interest, public safety. They should all be bringing the information that they have to a common place instead of hoarding it themselves.
Do you see the Canadian military or CSIS playing ball with that, considering that we know that the United States has used Canadian airspace to test some of their own equipment? I mean, going back to the 1980s, where they were testing cruise missiles over the Cold Lake Air Force Range.
Well, I mean, I think that these are, as I've said earlier, there's not many boundaries to UAPs. We've got cooperative efforts in regards to our own defenses here in North America, and I think that that'll continue regardless. But I just think that there's a real opportunity here to, assess what the practices are, and for our governments to work together.
Well, are you going to be satisfied if the United States doesn't open up to Canadian government regarding UAP? I mean, they're the ones in control of this stigma. I mean, or is it possible that Canada runs their own UAP branch without any joint effort from the United States?
Well, I think there are two most logical questions to be asked here in Canada, and the one is, what information does the government of Canada possess, and the other one is, if they have it, what are they doing with it? And I think, we may have to run our own intelligence process on this one. The U.S. is certainly going to do theirs themselves, but if you know. The fact that I've been able to pick up the phone and speak to some of these people that are dealing with this, I'm sure they're not telling me everything that they know. There's no doubt about that, as I said in my opening comments. But it is a great way to share and to get people like myself and other politicians and other researchers here in Canada, there's a scientific research angle to this as well. It's the physics of it and the chemistry of it is extremely valuable, I think, for those that are, developing products in those fields in our own nations.
Well, and that's definitely so. I mean, you could literally, with the amount of Canadian scientists that are part of the SCU, as well as Canada's chief scientists that we have throughout the country, there's no reason why the scientific community shouldn't be jumping on board with this.
Well, that's what I say. Yeah, I mean, this is a real curiosity for me. Is I'm no scientist, but I can tell you, if just the fact that all of this is there and we don't know what it is um, curious enough for me to be able to want to push this further to be able to get more answers. And just as we do in politics, we're not experts in those fields, and that's why we ask the questions, is so that we can share that information with the or get that information from the people that do have the answers and share it with other Canadians and in the case of the United States, our listeners there, with the American population as well.
How deep do you think this subject goes in Canada? Or do you think these logs of decades of sightings and encounters are just stored somewhere in some, vault underneath some of the parliamentary buildings? I mean, because to me, it seems very disorganized. You have, like I said, NAV Canada, Transport Canada, the military, CSIS, the RCMP,
Mhm.
all having their own files on this subject, but nobody seems to be doing anything with it. They seem to be almost in a dead zone.
Well, I think there's never been the public discussion like we're having now about it. As I said, it appears like taboo, most of the time, so maybe each one of them felt comfortable working in their own silos. But now that this is out there, I think it's a real opportunity for them to just say, "Hey, like we've got this information, we wouldn't mind sharing it with other departments." And I think that's the important thing to come out of all of this discussion is just how much more open can we make it, and what can we all learn from it? And you're not going to learn anything if we don't get it before hearings such as what the politicians in the United States asked for, and still got classified, reports, but unclassified ones as well to the senators themselves. So I think that's a pretty important step forward, one that has to take, and it'll take some time as well as more of that information comes out, because I'm sure there's even more than certainly there's more than what I know, and from the discussions I've had, and I think that's just part and parcel of how as more people feel comfortable talking about this, there'll be more questions asked. I want to go back and say when I said that Mr. Rutkowski has had thousands of reports of his own, I mean, by his own findings and his own followings of some of these, a good deal of them, maybe even as much as 90% of them, can be put down to a drone or something to that effect. But that still leaves a lot of sightings that they haven't got any answers for.
Do you feel you've got answers? Do you feel you have a little bit of a clue of what's going on with what you've been told by Hal Putoff, by Luis Elizondo, by the SCU, or members of the Canadian sector looking into this?
Well, just the speeds that I talked about, the G forces, the materials comment that was made, that's more than I knew 2 months ago in regards to some of these, Dave. So I think but I'm not naive enough to think that they're going to give me the whole load in the first time they talk to me. So, I think it's a pretty good understanding that there's more out there that we need to talk about. And it appears now as if there's going to be formats for people to be able to do that, have that conversation.
Are you comfortable going into public and stating that these craft, whatever they may be, are not of this earth and may be of an extraterrestrial descent?
Those aren't my words. I'm comfortable saying that because I'm just repeating what I've heard from these folks. They're very concerned, as I said, materials here that, they just don't know where they come from. And until they can discern that, I think we need to keep the radars on and keep the discussions open.
Does Larry Maguire believe that from what he has learned, that this is of an extraterrestrial background that is visiting this planet?
I can't say that because I don't know that. I don't know if it's extraterrestrial or not. I think there's, we can get into discussions about aliens and all the rest of that, but I have no evidence to that at all at this point. All I know is that all of these sightings have been of a, we always used to talk about unidentified flying objects, UFOs, and these are the same topics basically that we're dealing with. Just I think they're using the unidentified aerial phenomena because they just don't know what they are. But nobody's indicating that there's aliens on board and or extraterrestrial beings there at all. And but I think that's that. I keep going back to it. That's the objective here, is just to find out what the intent and the origin of these objects are.
Are you almost conclusive yourself then that it is not Russia, it is not China, or anything of this earth, from what people from Elizondo to Put-Off and others have stated?
Oh, absolutely. When I've listened to these scientists tell me that these, there's nothing made on Earth that could be doing this, their only other alternative is that they've indicated publicly is that this is a completely out of Earth experience. And so we need to know, we didn't even know what the stars were beyond our own galaxy for a while. And we had the Hubble telescope, and now we got the James Watt one. And I mean, there's just, huge opportunities that we're just getting into with that new technology. So we just don't know where it's going to go.
We have 2.5 minutes left with you tonight, MP Larry Maguire, and I want to say, thank you so much for taking time with us. What do you want to see Canadians do in order to help move this subject forward?
Well, I think this is the first time Canadian politics that anyone has brought this forward in Canada, and I think we need to be able to continue on with asking questions, involving all parties in a nonpartisan manner. As I said, if there's anything that can be nonpartisan in Canadian politics these days, this would have to be one of them. And I think we need to be able to get some clear answers, because we're certainly not dealing with something that that the people who have been in the intelligence systems in the US particularly, they've come forward. I'm assuming that some of the intelligence people that we have in some of our organizations here in Canada as well have similar experiences. We just haven't seen them yet. So I'd like to make sure that we get this all on the table.
Do letters and emails actually work? Because I'm going to tell you, I actually emailed my MP within the last few weeks and never got a response regarding UAP.
Well, I'd apologize for that myself, because I've, I try to get back to everybody as quick as I can too, Dave, but sometimes it takes me a while, and I've still got 2 or 3 of those calls that I'll be making first thing tomorrow morning. But because that's a good reminder for all of us as politicians, the key to being a good politician is to get back to everybody. But I do know the tables are pretty heavy these days with the things that have been going on as we recover from COVID here in Canada, and the same thing in the US. But if you have any problems with that, just tell your listeners to send an email to their MP, or to send it to myself. We'll try to get back to them as quick as we can. And I think I'd be really interested because I'm sure that there's thousands of people out there that have seen things that I have not seen, and I'd like to hear about them too. And we can just add that into Mr. Rakowski's and others bank of information that we have here in Canada.
Well, I'm going to say a big thank you, Honourable Larry Maguire, for coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to share this topic with you. Congratulations on being historic in the parliamentary system for bringing this topic to light. Let's just hope that the media, the mainstream, hops on board with this a little bit more, and your fellow politicians hop on board with this subject, because we got a long road to go.
Well, I can add to that. The media already has, Dave. We had an editorial in the Winnipeg Free Press here the other day on this topic itself, and that was one of the first editorials we've seen. But there's been others in major papers as well. So look forward to saying goodnight to all of your listeners, and it's been a pleasure to be with you.
MP Larry Maguire, Brandon-Souris, part of the Conservative Party of Canada. Coming up next, we have a great panel breaking down UFOs over Canada. Next on Spaced Out Radio. Great job, sir.
Oh,
great
you're
job.
welcome. Yeah, thank you, Dave. That was great. Yeah, no, it was a good evening, and if we can help with anything, let us know.
I appreciate your time, and I'll be in touch. As Drew there, I got to give him a hard time every now and again, but I do appreciate everything that you guys have done for us. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Thanks a lot.
Take care, sir. Good night.
Well, good night.
All right, Larry Maguire, everyone. How awesome was that? Nicole, I'm bringing you in. If you're ready. Oh, I got to mute you. Look who it is, everyone. It is the Mystic Lion himself.
who just hung up by accident 5 seconds ago.
I got Nicole. Now, let's see if Nicole is acting properly here. All right. You guys can chat. Our audience can hear you. And I'll be right back. I got to take a quick bathroom break here.
What's happening?
Mystic Lion. Did you just land?
Yeah, but pretty much. Yeah.
Wow.
I was just watching Kenobi up until a minute ago. So
I watched it twice when I was in Florida. I was like, oh, got nothing else to do. Better just watch Kenobi again.
I have no idea what's going on at all. I'm in a very different head and heart space. I just spent the last 5 days at a consciousness project in the Shenandoah Mountains, with a lot of really, really incredible people that everybody will probably be hearing about it pretty soon. We had such an amazing time together that we never even really got around to talk about when we were going to start talking about it. But it was just it was pretty life-changing for a lot of the people that were there. We had a group of folks together that was pretty incredibly talented and very dedicated. So, hold on a minute. I was just struck speakless by another panelist.
Dave doesn't know either. So that was perfect timing. Grant has perfect timing.
Hold on. Wow, what a surprise.
I think he might be talking. I muted him.
Oh wow. Well, Nicole, you know where I was.
I've heard from many people who were there about different things. Nobody's telling me the same thing. The grapevine. I think I was like, is this a tactic? So none of us know what's really going on. But I think obviously it's friends of people who are there. So, it's everybody.
Sure.
It's everybody's support system. So
it's in the water. Yeah. It's in the water that a lot of folks met up at the Monroe Institute for something pretty special. And a lot of new, really beautiful relationships got formed that are just going to bring so many folks together, that hadn't had a chance to work together or that have been working in parallel in a lot of ways. Some very big names from academia, some very, very well-known experiencers, dang near all experiencers in one way, shape, or form.
Every type, is that what you're meaning? All, like every type of experiencer?
Well, that and dang near everyone who attended. It wasn't 100% per se.
Gotcha.
But I would say that the full spectrum of what most of us would call UAP was represented, and I look forward to getting in depth and talking about it more later. In the future. But let me say this: there was the most beautiful marriage of the nuts and bolts side of this and then the heartfelt spiritualist leaning side of this. And we saw some just really mature people in real time bring together ideas that I've never seen brought together in the same location before in the same way. So yeah, we'll have to talk offline, obviously, because like I said, and I'm glad your audience is hearing this too, because it's not a secret. This is just stuff that, you know, we have to like get a chance to take a breath and go, how are we going to talk about it? Because like I said, I landed at 8 o'clock last night.
Dave looks really confused.
Why was I confused?
Well, I don't know. It's like you sat down and somebody disappeared.
Oh, weird. Weird.
So I don't know. I was trying to unmute our other panelist, and then he disappeared. Like Sean, I just think, is it my turn? Do I have to dip out and come back?
No,
well, I went to
no.
I went to unmute myself and I hung up. I'm sorry.
I think that's what I just did to Grant. I went to unmute him, and I think I kicked him out.
All right. We're waiting for Grant. We're waiting for Victor Vigiani to come on in. Hi, Dry Toast. How you doing? And who else has come on in here? Dry Toast, by the way, the best name on YouTube right there. Big thank you to Grant, Victor, Cherokee, Grant again, Carl, Bob, Ken, and Sally for the great super chats. It's a wonderful way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis. And, of course, we are going to be extending this panel here momentarily. We got 3 seconds. We're going to launch it. Hour 2 right now.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Here we go with the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Very special edition to you as we continue on here talking UAP all night long over Canada and the United States. We want to say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on Odyssey Radio, TalkStream Live, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Join us at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do us the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Napego. Oh, that's wrong. Napegical is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on tonight. We are going to go the next 2 hours, and we're going to have panelists floating in and out regarding this high topic after Larry Maguire, Member of Parliament for the Conservative Party of Canada, just spoke in his first exclusive long-range interview regarding UAP over Canada. Joining us from Spaced Out Radio and author and researcher Nicole Sakic, and of course Sean Cahill, who is one of the top people when it comes to the UAP subject and what is going on behind the scenes of everything that's going on. Sean and Nicole, welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. How are you?
Good evening, Dave. Hey, Nicole.
Doing
really well.
And I think we're going to add one more here very quickly, and that would be the legendary Grant Cameron, if his computer is going to be up and running here. But I want to get things started here because, Sean, you work closely with Lou Elizondo, and back last year of February, Elizondo met with Larry Maguire and others of the Conservative Party of Canada to try and get the ball rolling on this subject. How important is it to have America's number one ally in Canada starting to dip their feet into the UFO pool politically?
I think it's absolutely imperative. I think it's imperative that all of our Five Eyes partners take an equal stance next to the United States when it comes to this topic. And I think Canada is really showing a lot of courage and taking the lead in that when some of our other partners are not being as courageous.
All right, let's bring in Grant Cameron here, because Grant has been researching this subject since the 1970s. And Grant, thank you so much for staying up late and joining us tonight, as you are a hero and a mentor of many of us, not only sitting on this panel, but of many of our listeners out there. And Grant's computer seemed to freeze up, so I'll save that question for him. Nicole, for you, I want to get to you on this, because you working with Grant Cameron, you work with us. You're very understanding about the passion that we have on trying to get this subject popularized and talked about in Canada. When you hear Larry Maguire really stepping up and talking about, hey, politicians in Canada are finally starting to awaken, much like what has happened in the United States, what does that mean to you as a researcher?
Well, as you know, I often get mistaken for a Canadian myself, so my heart kind of goes out to all Canadians when they're facing the same sort of issues that we are here down south, as you guys put it. But no, over the last few years, just getting to know people in this community like Victor and Grant and yourself and so many others, just even on the experiencer level. And these issues are the same issues across the board. They're global issues. I think everybody is starting to go to their governments and ask these questions. And first of all, I was stunned, and I raised my little tiny Canadian flag when I saw Larry Maguire speaking. He was obviously educated on the topic. He was asking the right questions. Yeah, and he was tough. He didn't back down. I'm forgetting their names right now because I'm not Canadian, but there was the man and the woman, and he pressed them until they said they would come back with answers. So, I mean, that's the best we can ask of anybody, right? So,
right. Sean, we have heard from the fact that Larry Maguire has met with Luis Elizondo. Mm-hmm. He has met with Chris Mellon. He has met with Hal Puthoff, along with members of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. This is a guy who seems to be doing his homework and then passing that knowledge on to other parliamentary people up here in Canada. Is that how it gets started, or is that really showing that there is an interest in learning what is properly happening?
I think it's both of those things, because frankly, this is the investigation that the government's interested in. This is where you and I have talked in the past, where certain things veer off of what a lot of us are used to with ufology, et cetera. But I think this is where it starts, because this is where the breadcrumbs lead through. The right people that worked at the most recent programs, that have the most recent sight picture of what's going on, should be the first people to brief leaders and such, to give them the now picture. We will have time. Of course, we're all very, very concerned with the record, with the past, with what is yet to be revealed, et cetera. But I do think this is the right way to begin.
Grant Cameron, thank you so much for joining us. And once again, you are a hero and a mentor to many people in this field over the past almost 50 years of studying this subject. And much love to you, my friend, from all of us on this panel here tonight, because we all love and respect you. I'm curious. I mean, I know you listened to Larry Maguire. You have been involved in certain conversations that have happened behind the scenes regarding this. How do you feel about the Canadian government finally waking up to the idea that there are UAP happening on this side of the border?
Well, I will acknowledge Maguire was way better than I thought he'd be. I give him full credit for coming forward. I think we got to point out, though, that he's not the government. He's the opposition party, and that they have very limited power in what they can do. In the past, I dealt with other politicians in Canada, like Jack Murda, who was the member of parliament for the Carmen area where the big flop took place. And he was very interested until he became the member of the sitting party in power. And then he wouldn't talk. The same as I dealt with James Richardson, who was the Minister of National Defense. And while he was in opposition, he was great. But once he got into power, then you get them sort of, they quieten down because now they're speaking on behalf of the government. So I acknowledge that Maguire was well spoken. He was very open. I was very impressed that he actually went to what the conversation with Lou Elizondo. I knew that they'd had this conversation. He was very open about what he did, and I fully give him full credit for stepping out and doing this. Hopefully he can get a committee. I remember you kept asking him, he kept talking about this committee. I hope he will step forward and actually on the floor of the parliament request a committee to look at this, because as he pointed out, he has very limited power in what he can do. But if you open up the fact that we need a committee to look at this subject, stand forward. If we get a committee, then you'll get questions. Actually, the material I presented to Maguire was the Wilbur Smith material from the early days, and it was actually brought up in a committee with Wilbur Smith. There was a discussion took place with Wilbur Smith. So that's what you need. And in Canada, it's going to be much less secrecy than in the United States. I think you're going to get a lot of people coming forward, and I think it'll be quite the show.
Grant, I want to ask you one more question about the potential committee that Maguire would like to see, because we know as he stated, the New Democratic Party, otherwise called the NDP, up here in Canada, is on board. The Liberal Party of Canada, which is the governing party by Justin Trudeau, really hasn't spoken out about this, yet Maguire did state when I asked him about 2019 and Ambassador David McNaughton talking to the Prime Minister about UAP, that he did acknowledge that he had heard that meeting had happened, but nothing formal has been presented on paper yet. So the Liberals being quiet, you got the NDP on side. I guess this might fall into the hands of the Bloc Québécois coming in now, and if the Conservatives can get the Bloc Québécois to start talking about the UAP over Canada, then you have three parties against one.
Well, but the point I was making is that you've got to bring it up in Parliament and confront the sitting party to have the committee. You can have the Bloc Québécois and the NDP and the Conservatives all on board and talking about it, but until you move it into the power that is there, because that's what I found is once you're going to get the Conservatives, if they were to get power, you would suddenly find out they all shut up and they won't talk, because now you're talking on behalf of the government. It's one thing to be in the opposition party. They were very vocal. The guys that I talked to in the past were very vocal as long as they were in the opposition party. But as soon as they got into power, they suddenly wouldn't talk to me anymore, because now they're speaking officially on behalf of the government. And that's the big difference. Is as long as you're in the opposition party, you can say whatever you want, do whatever you want. But once you become in the sitting government, then everything you say becomes government policy, and nobody's going to want to go there. So that's why I say he has to confront in Parliament. He's got to confront the government to set up the committee, which they're not going to want to do, but that's where it's got to go.
Can I ask Grant?
Yeah.
Do those relationships still exist though? Did the folks that you were working with before that are now in power, as they see these hearings happening here, the new hearings in Brazil, as this becomes an international topic, do you think that you could rekindle those relationships and kind of kickstart and pick up where you left off before?
Okay, well, James Richardson has died, but Jack Murda, Maguire actually went and talked to him, and he didn't really have much to say. But so he's a conservative, and he was in power at one point. And that's what I'm saying. When Murda was in power, he didn't say anything about UFOs either when he was a conservative. But Maguire did go talk to Murda about it because he wanted to know. He talked to a few people that I'd given him advice to go talk to. That's the big thing here, is that you don't really have any power until you're in the government. And then when you're in the government, you're suddenly speaking on behalf of the government, and nobody wants to step forward and make a bold statement. Like we had Paul Hellyer, who was very vocal. But he was out of the government then. He didn't have anything to lose. So I really acknowledge the fact that Maguire is very open. I was very surprised because as Dave pointed out, I had conversations with his assistant. I provided them the Wilbur Smith files. I provided them the Stanton Friedman files. And I'm very surprised how open he was with the material. I thought he would be sort of hedging his answers about talking to Put Off and to Lou Elizondo and stuff, and he didn't. He basically spelled out what I was told behind the scenes had happened.
Sean, I want to ask you a quick question because you have an understanding of how this is working with the United States military, and yet during the conversation with Larry Maguire, we heard him say that, like, up here in Canada, everything seems to be in different places, in different filing cabinets. Nothing is together. Do you think up here in Canada, knowing the way our military is different than the American military, that there is a chance that the military up here in Canada may be a little bit more forthright with information comparatively to what we see happening in the United States?
Well, it's possible. Without taking us down a tangent, the U.S. military is one of the largest economies in the world. So, and no offense to our brothers up north, but comparing the two isn't really fair. I think that the Canadian military would most certainly be able to be more forthcoming and probably more quickly organize their compartmentalized and stovepipe efforts underneath something that we could all recognize quicker. But I do think this is where we have to make sure that we don't let something positive like being Five Eyes partners allow the Canadian military to hide behind America's skirts the way that Britain likes to. We have to put the pressure on the Canadians to do just what we just said. You have a smaller house, you have less files, presumably, so you should be quicker on the spot with your answers back to your people.
Can I speak to that, Dave?
Yeah, please do.
The Canadian, I think the problem you have is that the Canadians really don't have anybody that's really in the know that's interested in the subject. You have the Department of Transport, that was 1950. You had the National Research Council. It's always been split up where there's been various agencies have stuff. And he talked a lot about Chris Rakowski. That's just file stuff. That's the same stuff. If you go to National Research Council or to the Department of Transport, it's all just citing files. And all you need in order to run this, if you're running this like from an intelligence point of view, all you need is one person inside the Canadian Air Force, inside the Navy. You don't need everybody knowing what's going on. And that's how I think it would work in a compartmentalized thing. I think that the vast majority of people absolutely have no clue what's going on in the military. I brought this up with Paul Hellyer. When I confronted Paul Hellyer, he was very upset about the 1967 speech he'd made about the fact that Canada had opened a base in 1954 for UFOs to land. He was very upset with me. And he said, I didn't know what was going on. He said, I was Minister of Defense. He said there were some sighting files. I was busy putting all the forces together into one force. He said, I had no clue what was going on. And I think that's the problem in Canada. Nobody really knows what's going on except maybe one guy inside the Air Force or wherever it is, inside defense, who actually reports to the United States. That's all you need. You don't need everybody to know what's going on. And I think that's why you have such a vast array of different agencies working on it, because nobody really has any responsibility. It's the same thing in the United States. Who's actually running the show? You have the Air Force doesn't know what's going on, and the Navy, they've only been doing their sightings. And that's what you get is you get this thing, and there's somebody at the top, and there's one guy in the Navy, one guy in the Air Force who's reporting everything up to whoever's running the show. And in the United States, we don't know who's running the show. And I can almost guarantee you there's maybe 5 guys who know what's going on in Canada. The rest of them don't need to know what's going on, and they have no clue what's going on. My father flew Hellyer around. He was Department of Transport. He had a sighting. He didn't know what was going on. None of the people in his office knew what was going on. And I think that's the whole deal, is nobody knows what's going on.
Well, and let me remind everybody that is one of the metaphorical, if we're reading into it, purposes of the UAPTF is that is a task force that was told, find out what's going on. They had to start somewhere. And I know we've all recently got done talking about how we weren't exactly happy about all of it. We've got details we liked, and we saw spots that look like soft obfuscation on their part. Some of those questions, did you know? Oh, well, I never heard of that. It kind of went over kind of cold. But that's what we set that task force up for, was because people looked around and saw that stovepiped effort. And Grant, I can't speak on, the one guy here and the one guy there. I think down here it's going to be a little bit more comprehensive than that. But it's a big apparatus, so that makes for a lot of stovepipes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what people have to realize. It's very compartmentalized, and you can be, as Lou Elizondo pointed out, his boss didn't know what was going on, and that's how it works. People have to realize that this is as Wilbur Smith, the only real document that came out of Canada of any significance was one of the few top secret documents that ever came out, and that was Wilbur Smith's document, and he pointed out the fact that this was the most highly classified subject in the United States, rated higher than the H-bomb. And that was in 1950, 2 years before they detonated the first H-bomb. This is a highly compartmentalized subject. And it would be like if you go to the high guys, they'd say, no, hell no, we're not giving them anything. And they're going to put up the blockade, and they think it's national security. It's like I posted on Facebook the other day, Kit Green, who went to see Dr. Eric Walker, who we did the book on. Eric Walker knew what was going on. And Kit Green went to him and he said, I'd like to know what's going on. And he was cleared by the CIA to go in there and talk to him. And he said, give me 2 reasons why I should tell you what's going on. And Kit Green says, he told him, and he said, apparently I didn't give the right answer. He threw him out of the office. And that was Kit Green. And that's the whole deal. As he said to us, curiosity is not sufficient need to know. Why should we change the rules to satisfy your curiosity? You're never going to be given the answer, so give it up. And that's what people got to realize, is that the people at the top actually believe that this is properly classified, and they don't care if some committee wants it or whatever. They're going to do whatever they can to stop it, because they see this as the highest level of national security.
I want to ask Sean first, and then Nicole will get you in here as well, and Grant following up. One of the things that Larry Maguire brought up is eventually, once this gets onto the parliamentary floor, that Canada does need to set up its own UAP task force. Sean, I mean, you have firsthand knowledge of how that's going in the United States. Can Canada have a separate UAP task force on its own for its own country? Is that beneficial, or does it have to be a joint effort with the United States?
I have to say that the sovereignty of Canada is the question here, and what's Canada going to stand up for themselves? I certainly wouldn't want another country dictating what I investigated about this subject within the bounds of my own country. I understand that we have agreements and partnerships, so I would have to look into them more to actually find out what the letter of the law would be there, because there may be a chain of command that has been agreed upon of some kind. But I have to say that this is not just a military issue. So I would have to say that I digress. Internally, you'd have to make your own task force. You guys have to have an internal investigation. You're not part of the United States, as much as I wish you guys were. You're really cool, but you have to do it yourself. You have to have a task force. You have to look into your own files, because there's no way that stuff's ever going to come out otherwise. So for the Canadian people to look at that investigation as it unfolds and say, well, it's being overseen by Americans, what does that say about the sovereignty of the Canadian people? So I hope it doesn't go that way.
Nicole, what's your thoughts?
Well, actually, this has been kicking around for me since our hearings kind of brought this new element of wanting to work together with NASA and NOAA and, Space Force really stepping things up. Is there an equivalent in Canada? Because I sort of see this as like marijuana legalization across the country. We're seeing different forms of it trickle down across states. So, I mean, this is kind of starting in the United States. Canada is going to go, oh, well, they did that, so let's do this. Brazil is going to go, well, that's exactly what we're going to do. France is going to say something like, we've been doing this for 30 years already. And, so on. So that's what I guess I pose to you Canadians right now. Is there this next step already at play in Canada to where they can rapid fire get this in motion, or are they going to drag their feet like the UAPTF?
Well, we'll soon find out. Grant Cameron, we got you for another half an hour here, and we're going to get Grant's response as well as much more. Sean Cahill, Grant Cameron, Nicole Sackage, Victor Vigiani is somewhere out there in space trying to hook up He can't find his satellite in order to do so. Where's his Hubble? Where is his Hubble? But we are taking on a serious topic tonight as Canada enters a UAP conversation. The Canadian government is talking behind the scenes about UFOs and where this subject is going. We'll be back with more Spaced Out Radio. The second half of the show is next. All right, we're clear.
Okay, Dave.
Yes.
The only reason I came on, I wanna sell my rock here. The bidding starts at $100. You talked about it in the last hour. You know what it is?
I'll throw down 100 to get things started. What do I got to put it in? The super chat?
It is from Falcon Lake. There's only been
Really?
100 people on the site. This is actually a piece of the rock that the UFO is sitting on. It started to shatter the top of the rock. So we were there with a film crew, and there's been less than 100 people on the site. So I started filling my pocket with rock, and then Desta started. She saw what I was doing. She started taking rocks. So this is a piece. The UFO foot may actually have been sitting right on this rock. This is from the Falcon Lake site where the UFO is sitting. $100.
That's really cool.
Didn't the Spaced Out Radio artist just do something on Falcon Lake? Wasn't he painting that? Or am I wrong? That's amazing, Grant. I will give you $100.
Really
cool. Nobody else has to bid.
It was quite the scene, especially when the guy told me there's been less than 100 people on the site. I think it's coming up in a documentary by Rob Freeman, who was at it came from Rob Freeman, who was at the big event at the with Sean last week.
Hi, Victor.
Hello.
Victor.
Victor Vigiani is here from Zealand Communications, or in Canada, Zland Communications. Zland. Thomas Fessler has a question for you, Grant. Why are the non-human entities ramping up their activity?
Well, it's a gradual revelation. They started in 1890 saying they were from Mars. Then they said they were from Uranus, and then they said they were from Zeta Reticuli, and they're building it up. And this is their disclosure as well. They're the ones that started the whole thing. And they're not ETs. You mentioned I will absolutely put all my money down. I'll put my little rock down. It will turn out not to be ETs. If you take a look at To the Stars Academy, it was Lou Elizondo, it was Mellon, it was Semi-Van, it was Putoff, it was Eric Davis, and none of them called it ET. They called them the others, because that I say is the big mystery. It's not ET. It's going to be something completely different. Or Jacques Vallée said, this is going to be much more complex than ETs.
Victor, how did you enjoy it? How did you enjoy hour one with Larry?
It was good. It was. I agree that Grant kind of described it well. He outlined things as he knows them, and I'm sort of the opinion that, and I was going to have to ask you the question. You know, would he be able to admit that he knows not enough to really come forward in a way that's going to convince anybody in any one of the parties to take him seriously? Does he really know enough, and does he have access to information about what these UAPs are, where they're from, what technologies they're using? He really he put on his dancing shoes, I guess is what I'm saying. Very similar to what the people at the UAP hearing did in Washington. The Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly Act that they put on was amazing. Now, I don't blame Larry for dancing around the issues, because I really don't think he knows a lot about what's going on. He needs to really become fully vested in this issue and realize that in order for this issue to come forward, in order for questions to be asked on the floor of the House of Commons to the Minister of Defense and anybody else in CSIS, and directed questions and putting people on the spot. Right now, Larry doesn't have enough information to do all of those kinds of things. I respect what he's done. I respect what he's doing. My conversations with Drew indicate that Drew is extremely knowledgeable about this information, and it's going to take a lot of time for Larry to get up to speed with what's really happening with respect to the entirety of the issue, not just the UAP issue, but the issues of technology, of how these craft move back and forth, all the things that they're exhibiting with respect to technology. And if Larry can make that case clearly, excuse me, the technology issue clearly, I think people will perk up. They're not going to perk up on about ETs or extraterrestrials yet. They might eventually, they might talk about the abduction phenomenon or the experiences phenomenon. They might begin talking about consciousness, but it's nowhere near the time to bring those issues forward. Right. They have
Victor,
to be.
You got to hold on right there because we are going to come back here in 3 seconds.
Okay.
We passed the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for tuning us in as we talk UFOs over Canada. We got a great panel for you. We'll bring them in here momentarily. We want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on with the panel tonight, reacting to Member of Parliament Larry Maguire from the Conservative Party of Canada coming out and bringing UFOs to the topic of government officials within Ottawa, Canada's capital. Joining us tonight, the legendary Grant Cameron from Zealand Communications, Victor Vigiani, Sean Cahill, and Nicole Sakic. And I want to get right to it because Larry Maguire was very hesitant to say where these craft are from, but it was a very, I'm going to use the term American government type answer where we know it's not from here, but he was very afraid to say where it was from. It reminds me of the early stages of what the To the Stars Academy was trying to say about this whole topic, to take it in phases. And Sean, you and I have talked about these phases before. Do you see, because of the infancy of this subject right now within the Canadian Parliament, that they have to take it, Sean, with infant legs?
Well, yeah, I do. I really do. And I mean, as Victor said, we're not ready for the consciousness piece right now in the mainstream. That's why folks like myself and Rob and others were where we were this weekend working on what we're working on. Because like somebody else is working on something ahead of time. You know what I mean? And that's basically who we swim in the pool with. But there's two sides to this. There is a nuts and bolts side, and that's something that people can wrap their head around. That's what government folks and military folks can wrap their heads around. And that we have to start there with those baby steps. People have to be given a chance to tiptoe up to this the way that we did. A lot of people were talking a few weeks back about the learning curve surrounding this topic. There's a lot of people getting into it very quickly and very good at it, learning a lot of things. But unfortunately, those are the folks that are informing leadership for the most part. Leadership's not going to the pool of the people who've been working on it for decades at a time, like Grant and other folks here. So in a lot of cases, we're the people in this room right here that are informing those new thought leaders, those staffers, those assistants, those other congressional personnel and government aspects. But it's like this tiptoeing race, because you want to get there, but you don't want to go too fast that you scare people away. So I think we're on a good track, and I think that if Canada and other international partners mirror in a way what we did, I think they'll find the same success.
Victor, let's get your opinion of that.
Well, I completely agree with what Sean is saying. It's and your analogy of infant legs, because there are different levels of understanding and different levels of how people will interpret or internalize this information. There's a certain reluctancy within the human family to accept the fact that this is going on. And I have always made the analysis, and I use my background as a school principal with respect to this issue, which is the parallels are amazingly similar with respect to the issue of child abuse. When I was a principal in the early 80s, the government here in Ontario brought in legislation to address the issue of child abuse. Before that, it was a non sequitur. You did not speak about, children were not allowed to disclose what was happening in their homes, the sexual abuse that was going on, the physical abuse that was going on. Then all of a sudden, the nurses within Ontario came to schools with programs that allowed children, puppet programs and different kind of theater presentations that allowed children to come forward to talk about this. And when we had one of the programs at my school, St. Matthew's School here in Toronto, the day that we had the program, we had grade 1s to 4 in the gym, and then we had grades 5 to 8 in the gym in 2 separate performances. And after that performance, after both performances, we had 87 disclosures of children who came forward that said that they were raped by their uncle, who put their hand down my pants, and my dad hits my mother and me with a shoe every morning before he goes to work. 87 disclosures. Now, that's a pretty kind of powerful thing to acknowledge. And we're going through the same kind of thing with respect to this issue. People are fearful of talking about it. Politicians won't touch it, but eventually politicians are going to see that they'll have to touch it, that they'll have to get into what's going on and dismiss this whole Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly approach that we saw at the hearings in Washington, D.C., and to some degree, how Larry managed some of your questions this evening. That's going to be a thing of the past very, very soon. And eventually people are going to be talking about this like they talk about the issue of child abuse and other really important issues like abortion and like women's rights. And it will be uncovered completely, but it's going to take some time for people to get there.
All right, Greg Cameron, let's bring you in here on the subject. I mean, do you see this getting bipartisan type of support within the Canadian parliamentary system, or do you see the game starting to be played with this?
Well, no, if they get it in front of a committee, then it's going to be a free for all, because you know how Canadian politics works. I mean, everybody goes in there, and it's the matter of getting the government party to have the hearing. They're the ones that have to approve the hearing and bring the people in and stuff like that. Once you get there, but I still maintain, as we go back to this thing, I still maintain, when you go to Lou Elizondo and you say, Lou, where are they from? He says, I don't know. Lou ain't lying. They don't know where this is from. This is much more complex than people think. That's why I would give Maguire the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. Anybody who says they know, like the Canadians. The Canadian alien his name was Afa. And I remember Afa claimed he was from Uranus, and he said there was 500 million people on Uranus. And I remember Wilbur Smith's assistant, the metallurgist guy, said, let me tell you what, don't ever think for a second that Wilbur Smith and I believe this guy was from Uranus. We got to realize that this is way more complex. I think Maguire is telling what he knows. He doesn't know that much. I don't think any of them know. It's almost like Jim Semivan, who is behind this entire disclosure. He's the guy that started this thing in 2016. He was face to face with the beings, and he said, there does not appear to be any there. Does that sound like he's lying, or that sounds like he doesn't know and nobody knows? Yes, we know there's UFO sightings. Yes, we know there's hardware. Yes, we know there's bodies. But beyond that, I don't think they really know too much of anything. One other comment I'd like to quickly make. The difference between the Americans and the Canadians is Americans are going to look more at national security issues. So what you see is the hearings are all about Space Command and they're interfering with our military and all this kind of stuff. In Canada, we couldn't care less about that. It's about hockey. So what does Maguire say? He says, I'd like to get, who did he say he wanted to run? He said, I didn't want the military to run it. And I give him full credit for that, because that's the scary part, is when you get politicians who start handing money to the people in Lockheed and stuff like that. What has he said? He said, I would like the head scientist to run the thing. So that's the way it's looked at in Canada. This is a scientific issue. It's not a military issue. It's not a national security issue. And that's what John Podesta had proposed when he was asked about. He said he wanted Biden to put in the head of the OSTP, or the Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is the science advisor to the president. That didn't happen. It's still going national security. It's all about military in the United States. And he did not bring up the military. He said he'd like the head scientist. So I give him all the applause in the world for doing that. It's a scientific issue. It's not a military issue.
Grant, I want to ask you again, and then Victor, follow up. What is the difference between disclosure in the United States and disclosure in Canada?
I think disclosure in Canada is more an issue of, this is really cool. What do you think this is? And it's been hijacked in the United States by the military contractors, by the people who want money. And that's what Eisenhower warned about in his last speech. He said, beware the military industrial congressional complex. And that means that once you get politicians in there and you close the cycle and they start handing money to the military contractors and the military is involved, you're never going to stop it. Because if you take a look at, and Drew mentioned this when I talked to Drew, the assistant for Maguire, he's talking to somebody about the F-35 in the United States, which Canada is sort of fighting about buying this high-priced jet. If you take a look at how it works, the F-35 jet fighter is made in 46 different states. And why is that? Because if they're $10 million overrun on a jet, nobody's going to say anything because everybody's got their hand in the pot. And that's the thing that fears me, is that military is going to get the politicians on side, and then the military, that's where the money comes from. So that's what I see is happening in the United States. They're using this fear thing because they want the money. So the money's going to start flowing, but it's going to be flowing to the black budget programs. And what you see in the United States is they're having these committee things, but what are we learning? Nothing. There's 144 sightings. We can't tell you about the sightings. It's all still black. It's all still run by the people behind the scenes. And that's the scary part, is if it's run by these guys that have run it all the time, all they're going to do is be getting all the taxpayer money, and you're told, just shut up, pay your taxes, and let us do what we're doing. We haven't learned anything in the United States as to these hearings. It's all still blocked. And that's the part where we got to get it into a committee where people get to talk, and it's got nothing to do with military.
Victor, what is the difference between disclosure Canada-wise and American-wise?
Well, there's a big difference with respect to, I guess, the culture. First of all, there's the cultural differences between us and the United States. Right now, if you're talking about the current culture in the United States, in the context of what's going on there with respect to how their constitution is totally misaligned and misunderstood by a huge portion of the American public. They just do not understand what their constitution is all about. Democracy is in a threat position. The very leadership in the United States is under threat. So that is extremely difficult, a very difficult context for which any kind of disclosure, and I'd like to use the word acknowledgement to come forward. I think acknowledgement is a much better descriptor than disclosure. Disclosure is sort of a word that describes letting a secret out of the bag, which has already happened. Acknowledgement means that we are engaged in open discourse about this issue. And we see some of that going on in the United States. So that's one of the things that's going on there. Culturally in Canada, we are a different family, we have a different understanding about how we operate within our government. I'm not saying it's better, but it's a more open format within government. But that said, I need to kind of frame my comments for your listeners, David, in saying that if we leave this issue to government and science, we'll never get anywhere. Government has no business in this issue, okay? And neither does science in this issue. And there are a lot of people around who will agree with me on that. John Mack was one of them. He says, if we leave it to government and to science, we won't get anywhere. We need to create an open discourse. First of all, the kind of discourse that's going on right now, the way that the people that are hearing my words and people that are hearing your words, have to take this on as a family, as a human family, to create a discourse so that we're all talking about this issue and that we all realize that we're dealing with an off-world situation, be it interdimensional, be it whatever it happens to be. And as soon as that open discourse takes place, then I think whoever these beings, these off-world creatures, being whatever you want to call them, are, will it kind of understand that we are attempting as a human family to deal with this issue among the family, not with government, not with science, but among the human family, and the consciousness among us as a family. And once whoever these beings are realize that we are being prepared to make contact, then contact will occur directly from whoever these beings are to us as a human family. That's how it's going to happen. And I have no faith in government that's going to create any kind of situation, be it party politics or whatever. And I have no faith in science to understand this. So we are dealing with an entity, as Grant probably said very, very clearly, that we really don't know who they are. They could be interdimensional. They could be from whatever, galaxy, whatever. We just don't know. But we have to exhibit the understanding among the human family that we're ready to make contact in some way. And that contact will eventually come once this open discourse that I described earlier happens in a very clear and international way. And I've got much more to say about that in terms of borders and countries, but I'll leave that aside for now.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Sean, I want to ask you about this because you are very understanding of the American side of this. The Canadian side, to me, and listening to Grant Victor, it's a little bit more lax. It's a little bit more, hey, let's get some understanding and going with this, whether it's politics, whether it's the experiencers, whether it's the scientific community. How do you see that differing on a disclosure end? Because disclosure, to me, has a different meaning for every person who has either eyewitnessed or experienced the phenomena compared to those who have never experienced but have an interest in the topic.
Well, from talking to me for the last couple of years and us being friends and not pulling any punches when we're working on this, that I'm not a big fan of a lot of the semantics that the guys were using. I'm batting cleanup now, so I get to talk about everybody. But I wasn't a fan of a lot of the semantics. I want to say I agree pretty much with the overall message. But I mean, I'm going to make a joke right now, but I mean, I had lunch with government and science last week, and they told me that, there's no dude named government. There's no person named science. Stop saying it like that, because everyone I work with is in government and science, and they want to work on this, and they're very interested. So that demonization of large blocks of leadership has got to stop. Pardon me for railing on that for a minute. But I totally agree with you otherwise. This is a conversation that we all have to have. But let me say this. I've been telling you since I met you that disclosure already happened. And now finally we're all agreeing that we don't know what the hell's going on. And that goes all the way up to the top. Because the question is, where are they from? Who do you ask? We have to ask them. And they're not exactly showing up with any consistency. As Grant mentioned earlier, if these communications are legitimate and they're telling us they're from Uranus, well, how about you follow that up with a little explanation of how you're living in a gas giant and why that would make sense? These little bits and snippets that we have over the years, well, they're from Zeta Reticuli. How the hell do we know any of that? We can't trace any of this thing back to an origin. So that's why I'm also a fan of Jacques Vallée, because he talks about, a slot machine of probability sometimes with this and the way that it keeps coming up. So don't want to keep railing on stuff, just want to get a lot of information densely packed in. I think it's going to come down, unfortunately, to semantics. We're going to have to find the right words that make sense to everybody at the same time. So for some people, it's already been disclosure because they're not being presumptuous about origins and things like that. Acknowledgement is great. I love acknowledgement. If we can get the government just to say something crazy is going on and we don't get it and we can't control it, we need more help, that's a great place to start to me. But it can't just be the conversation any of us hope and dream for or want. It has to be the one that's real. And so that's why I've always leaned on nuts and bolts. But the other side is absolutely important. That's why I was at the Monroe Institute for this whole past weekend. And the public isn't ready for that, but the spaced out radio audience is. And so that's where it's going to start, and it's going to evangelize out from there and in other places too. Pardon me for using the word evangelize, because I don't want to lean in too hard, but hey, end rant, and I'll step off the soapbox.
All right, Greg Cameron, let's bring you back in. Nicole, I'm not ignoring you. I know our time is limited with Grant here, and I want to make sure we get Grant in here as much as we can with about 5 minutes to go. Grant, the idea that the Canadian government needs to bring all facets together, from CSIS, the RCMP, the DND, NAV Canada, Transport Canada, and every group available to have that outside of Chris Rutkowski, who seems to get every piece of paper put his way, and kudos to him for building that bridge. Do you see in the next couple of years where we do have a branch or all of this information coming together so we can start gluing some of these puzzle pieces together, or being made more accessible to the mainstream public?
Well, once again, I think it comes down to this committee. If they can get the committee going, then you can call in witnesses. You can bring in Lou Elizondo. You can raise consciousness. That's what it's really all about here. It's not really finding out direct answers. You raise consciousness. You get people talking about it. And it's like gay rights. It's like gay marriage. It's like African-American rights. When enough people talk about it, people are going to make the right decision. You just got to keep talking. There was a lot of bad jokes made about African Americans and gays and stuff, and then it just suddenly changes. It just suddenly flips, and you get guys like Cheney saying, "Oh yeah, gay marriage is okay," and that's the way it works. You need to raise the consciousness. So that's what I think really has to happen. In terms of the departments, you're not going to have anybody in any of these departments that knows what's going on, or if they do know what's going on, they ain't volunteering to go in. So it's not a thing where everybody's hiding the biscuit, and we just got to find those people and they're all going to go together. My father was in the government. He was a pilot for the Canadian government, and I knew people in his office, and I don't think anybody except a couple of people really know what's going on. Most of them could not care less. They'd have no idea. The same in the United States. Until you get to the high ranks, majority of people have no clue what's going on. They're doing their little job. They don't know what's going on in the next office. It's like I always make the joke. I worked at the University of Manitoba. I had keys to 8 vice president's office. I had the keys to the president's office. I had keys to human resources. I had keys to payroll. I had keys to almost every room in the thing. I left 6 months before a major buyout. Do you think I knew what was going on at the university? No, I only knew my little thing. And I didn't. You think everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows their little job. So I don't think you're going to get, you need this thing where you have a platform where people can come. And that's what's happening in the United States by Jim Semivan starting this whole thing. You got this thing, the New York Times, and even Maguire says it was the New York Times article that got him going. And I remember when Steve Bassett, I tell the story, Steve Bassett at an X conference, and we're going on this thing. When do you think disclosure is going to take place? And everything, 6 months, 1 year. And they came to me and I said, 2042. I never in my life, in 47 years, ever believed what happened would happen when that New York Times article came out. It was sort of like everybody said, yeah, we know that. Okay, let's go to the next thing. It was nobody jumped off a building. Nobody committed suicide. The stock market didn't melt down. It moved, and things have changed. And I've been in this for 47 years. More things have happened in the last 5 years than 47. This thing is rolling along. I have no problem that this thing is going to unravel. Maguire is a big part of what's going on in Canada. And it's the same as I disagreed with a lot of stuff that Paul Hellyer said, but because Paul Hellyer was the former Minister of Defense, everybody listened to him, and it raised the consciousness. And when Maguire starts talking, a lot of people are going to listen. There's a lot of newspapers going to pick it up, and it's going to raise the consciousness. And if once you get a committee and the discussion starts, then you can bring in Lou Elizondo, Mellon, all these people, and put them under oath, and the thing will roll. I'm very optimistic of what's happening.
With 1 minute to go, Grant, you think we're going to see hearings in Canada?
I don't know. I was waiting for Maguire to say that. It kept going about, we'd like to have these hearings. He's the guy that's got to initiate it. I don't think he has to really. I think he's much more versed than I thought he was versed on the subject. I don't think he has to really prove it. I just think he has to make some sort of, that's the way it works in the Canadian Parliament, is you stand up, you know how that works in question period, and you pose a question to the other side, and everybody in Canada is watching. That's what he's got to do. He's got to step forward and make on the the floor of the House of Commons and request a committee and put the government on, put their feet to the fire and try to force the hearing. Until there's a hearing, nothing's going to happen. But once the hearing starts, it's game over, I think, in Canada. There's just so many people that will come forward. It'll be like TV that everybody wants to watch. I think I'm very optimistic.
Great. That means most likely we are going to get some Kelly Hrudey or Ron McLean calling the shots on this one from Hockey Night in Canada, except Hockey Night or UFO Night in Canada. I hope that doesn't happen because I can't stand Ron McLean, man. Cannot stand.
You're going to get some famous person come forward and say, yeah, me too. I mean, that's the way it works. It happened in the United States.
True. Very true. We're going to say goodnight to Grant Cameron and Minty Hyperspace, a.k.a. Sean Cahill. We're going to continue on with Nicole Sackage, Victor Vigiani in Hour 3 of Spaced Out Radio, Canada and UFOs. It's game on. Spaced Out Radio right after this.
Where's my wallet?
Were you
Great
there,
job.
Victor? Were you there, Victor? You know what this is?
Be right back, guys.
What's that?
That's from from Falcon Lake. That's from the actual rock where the UFO was sitting. They were film crew. Rob Freeman came in with a film crew. We went in. There's been less than 100 people at the site. And the top of the rock is all fracturing. So I started grabbing pieces of the rock. So the UFO foot may have actually been sitting right on this thing. So I put it up, and Nicole has offered me $100 for it.
Wow.
Hey, fellas, I gotta go. I just got back at 8 o'clock tonight from DC. I was only in DC for the plane. I was out at Monroe with a bunch of folks that I'm sure we'll all hear about soon. Grant, I know you got a lot of photos sent to you. We had an amazing time. I'll tell you, we didn't summon the mothership, but we did knock the random number generators off their block every time that we got together.
Wow.
So there's a lot more to come. But we had a great time. It was really great to talk to all you guys. I wish I could stick around. Grant, I hope to talk to you later this week. Nicole,
see you, Sean.
Great to meet you.
Okay,
have a great night, you guys.
Grant, could you hang on for a second?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
For a second. I just want to make you aware of something that I've spoken to Kathleen Marden about, and I had a spontaneous communication with an individual from the United States. And she has told me a story that is absolutely unbelievable, that her father, actually her stepfather, was one of the divers that went into Shag Harbour the night of the crash. Okay. He's one of, I think, 4 or 5 divers that went into the craft, down to see the craft. And after he came out, and I wish Dave was here to hear this, but I'll tell him in a minute, that several days later, he and one other person were summoned to the office of Curtis LeMay through the United States Navy. And they met with Curtis LeMay at his cottage, in the office that he has, a cottage that he has. And this witness and the diver were brought into his office, and they were both threatened by Curtis LeMay never to speak about this issue again. And I'm working on this with Kathleen to try to make sense of it all. So I just want you to know about that as a bit of information. There's a whole lot more to the story than this, but I just want you to just file that, and I'm going to be seeing how far this thing goes, because the intrigue surrounding all of this and what was seen down under the water with 2 other craft, with 1 additional craft, and the way it was damaged is absolutely unbelievable. And what happened during that period of time is, I just have trouble wrapping my head around it. I just want to let you know that that's going on, and I'm nowhere near any kind of conclusions about it. But the information that I have and the information that Kathleen has is just absolutely astounding. So I just thought I'd share that with you.
Hopefully he's got something in writing rather than just a statement to his daughter.
Well, we're trying to get him to say something. I don't know if he has anything in writing.
Oh, he's still alive. He's still alive.
Apparently, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Right on. Grant Cameron.
Okay, good night. Take care.
Grant, thank you, my brother. Much love to you.
Talk to you later.
Bye, Dr. UFO Phenomenon
There you
Consciousness
go.
Boss.
Thanks for the $100.
Your check's in the mail. It's in the mail.
Work hard, Nicole. I may give you a piece.
That's worth like 10 gold stars, right?
That's
$10. You take American money. I know you do.
Yeah, real money. Real money.
Bye.
Gotta love Grant Cameron. Gotta love Sean Cahill. Gotta love Nicole Sakic and Victor Vigiani for hanging on out. We got an important conversation the next 45 minutes here. And it's going to be amazing. Friggin' amazing. I'm really happy about tonight, Victor.
Good.
Very happy about tonight.
How long we got about to showtime?
We got about 90 seconds, just over 90 seconds.
Just want to get another bottle of water, okay?
Yeah, you run. We got time. This has been fantastic. Great audience tonight. Great guests. What a great night of radio here on Spaced Out Radio. Thank you all for tuning on into this extremely memorable night tonight. Couldn't have done it without all of you here listening on in and making this show extremely, extremely memorable for all of us here. Yeah, I love it, Grandmaster. Epic show. That is the way to put it. That is the way to put it. I have been working on getting Larry Maguire, and Nicole and Victor know this. I've been working on this for over 2 years. Hi, Mad Scientist Happy. How are you? Over 2 years I've been working on this, and there's still more to come out. And I could tell everybody that I am going to be having further conversations with other politicians behind the scenes up here in Canada very, very soon regarding this subject. And yes, Victor and Grant are both Canadian. And I want to say a big thank you tonight to Thomas ×2, Dry Toast, Pix, Obi, Grant ×2, Victor, Cherokee, Sally, Ken, Bob, and Carl for the amazing super chats. Love the support of SOR and love the support of everybody who's given us a thumbs up, thumbs down. Hit that subscribe button. We're going to rock and roll here in about 5 seconds with hour number 3. And let's push it. We got a lot more information coming. Here we go.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for tuning on into this historic night of radio here on the mighty SOR. We very much appreciate it. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on Odyssey Radio, TalkStream Live, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Join us at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Now, Pegacle is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets a password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on with our panel tonight, looking in and going over the words of Member of Parliament Larry Maguire from the Conservative Party of Canada, who's really breaking open this story of UAP over Canadian airspace and nuclear facilities. We are joined by Victor Vigiani from Zealand Communication, author, researcher, and part of the Spaced Out Radio team. Nicole Sakic is here as well. And I want to ask you, Victor, getting right into it with the fact that we have, I asked Grant Cameron this right before the break. I'll ask you now. We have so many different facets of information and files upon files of information that are stored at Transport Canada, NAV Canada, CSIS, the RCMP, the Department of National Defense, other conglomerates and organizations as well at alphabet agencies. How do we start getting all of this put together to start solving this puzzle piece?
Well, I can answer that question pretty accurately using a bit of a metaphor, if you want. And I think you and I'm not sure about Nicole, but you and I are probably of a generation where you might remember going into one of these large department stores and walking through the audio visual section of the Eaton's or Simpsons or the Bay or whatever. And do you remember the large wall where there's all the TVs on it? How many TVs were up there, Dave? 25, 30, 50 TVs all up in the same wall, okay? And you stand there as a kid, as a 10-year-old, and some of the TVs were on one station or another station or whatever it happens to be. And that little kid is sitting there looking at those argumentatively 25 televisions. And how does a 10-year-old make sense of the sensory input from all 25 of those televisions? He can't. And there's no way even an adult couldn't make sense of all the sensory input that's coming forward from those 25 or 50 televisions. That's what we're confronted with here. And you just outlined it very, very carefully in the question to me. We have to try to put these pieces of the puzzle together. And as far as I'm concerned, right now, there are probably 4 or 5 different lenses through which this information is coming to us. If there's a cultural lens of disbelief, there's a military lens of this national threat. There's a scientific lens of, oh, these are all just X, Y, and Z craft from wherever. There's an anthropological lens that these things, these craft, these beings have been around on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years. And some of the anthropological information, as crazy as it might sound, is a lens through which we get information that these beings actually created us. I don't know if I believe that or not, but I'm saying that that's a lens. And then there's the political lens that we have to interpret. So I guess an answer to your question is we've got to sort out those lenses and bring them into closer focus to see what they have in common and which ones to eliminate. And that's where I think we're at. And as I said earlier in the program, the only way to do that is to create in Canada, and I think we can do it, and Larry's on the right track with it, is create an open discourse, an open narrative within the Canadian context and discuss this thing and just literally sit down at the table like a family would sit down for a family meeting and say, okay, let's sort this out. What does it really mean? With no political bias and no agendas, what does it really mean to the human family? And what does it mean to us as Canadians? And that's the kind of discourse that I got the sense that I think that that's what Larry wants. I sort of watched his body language. I watched his eyes. I watched his expression. And I think he's the kind of person, he's the kind of personality that can do this. I think he's a consensus builder. That's what I liked about what Larry did. I think he's a consensus, and that's what we need. We don't need a flag waving, leader kind of thing. We don't need an authoritarian. We need a consensus builder. And I think that's exactly where Larry is. So I guess in answer to your question, I think we can do it, but we're going to have to be very, very circumspect about how we handle it.
Nicole, I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it kind of follows suit with what Grant Victor mentioned before, and Sean even touched on, with these being social movement issues as well as political issues, military issues, science issues, academic issues, all at play. And I think what we've seen so far with the United States hearing is, they just hammered over and over and over again, ending the stigmata. And I think that is an important step in reshaping this narrative that I think, honestly, the reshaping of this narrative, I think, started when Hillary Clinton said UAP on, was it Jimmy Kimmel's show?
Yeah.
I believe so.
So this reshaping has been talked about and spoken of over decades. And really, it takes people interested in the community and moving it forward and trying to figure it out to reshape it. And yeah, we're all right. There's a lot of irons in the fire right now, and nobody really knows how to move it forward. except ending the stigmata. They've already said it's been important. It increased the number of reports that the UAPTF already received. So I think once this stigma is taken away, I've done that twice, I think, is taken away or lessened, I think we're already starting to see the narrative shift in what is an experience and what is an experiencer and what that really means. And I know Grant's the king of talking documents, but we have dug through correspondence and documents of Cosmic Club working group members where I think it was maybe over a decade ago where they stopped referring to it as ufology and it was more phenomenology. And they were looking for phenomenologists, not ufologists. And so that started giving people in the research field more clues to dig on. It's like, well, where are they going with this? That's where it leads to, the psychic abilities and mental capabilities and consciousness, like we're talking about now. So we know that narrative needs to be reshaped. It's not, to quote Harry Reid, it's not little green men. It's not just flying saucers in the sky. And that is what it's going to take: spiritual leaders, political leaders, social movement leaders to reshape that. But that's why more people have to keep coming up and talking about their truth and what is really happening with the phenomenon. It's more than just blinky lights in the sky, and we will get there. But the baby steps are in play. Reshaping this whole narrative is in play. And we just have to keep moving that needle forward. Like, it's happening so quickly. Like, it's just, pedal to the metal.
Well, you're right, Nicole. I think you're exactly right about reshaping this thing.
Yeah.
And it has gone. Think back, 35 years, for example. And I can do that because I'm that age. I mean, this stuff that we're talking about right now was unthinkable. It was unthinkable in the 70s and the early 80s. Nobody spoke about consciousness. Nobody spoke about reshaping a narrative. We were in our infancy in our understanding of what might be going on. And in a way, we're still in the infancy, but we are gradually, it's like whittling away at a stick. You're sharpening that point completely and ever just a little bit more each time something happens. Mm-hmm. And I think, what we talked about earlier, that 2017 article of Blumenthal, Kane, and Helena Cooper. I mean, I put a biblical analogy on that one. Everything that happened before 2017, as far as I can recollect and see and understand, was the Old Testament of what this thing called phenomenology or ufology or whatever you want to call it was. That was the Old Testament. 2017 was the New Testament, and we're moving on from that. So that speaks to your point about how we're reshaping the narrative. And I think Blumenthal and Kane and Cooper, did that. They began this reshaping, and it's going to continue. There's going to be other Luis Elizondos. There's going to be other John Max. There's going to be other people who will help us reshape.
I think there already is.
Nicole, you accidentally hit mute on your microphone.
I think there already is other John Max. I think they're in our community now. I think they're starting to emerge, and torches are being passed. Like, Sean brought up all of these guys going to the Monroe Institute. Well, how long has the Monroe Institute been the place to study consciousness? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is already in academia. It's just not being utilized in the government. Not yet.
Yeah, it's not part of the larger narrative is what you're saying.
They haven't given up on being able to exploit this yet. When they give up on that, they'll move it on out to what Grant brought it up, the science advisor to the president. And when it gets into the sciences, that's when it can get into academia, and I'm not saying parts haven't been shuffled through academia, in secret, whatever, and stuff like that. But that's part of changing the narrative too. It was said earlier, I think Sean said it earlier. He knows people in government. He knows the scientists. He knows the interest is there. It's just nobody knows what to do with it yet. And is it over in Germany? I think a college has instituted like the first classes and courses in ufology. Like that's kind of amazing to me, just right in and of itself. It has to start somewhere. I know everybody kind of went on pause during COVID with a lot of things they had to do, but Rice University was so busy through COVID with the Archive of the Impossible and those scholars and journalists and people coming together from so many different backgrounds. So, I mean, all these little pieces are at play, but yeah, it's the perfect storm. We all have to do our pieces. Yeah. And I think it does start to an extent down at the family level, like you brought up, Victor. I mean, grassroots often start with families sharing their thoughts with each other. And I think now more than ever, experiencers are coming out in their families, talking to their family members about it. I mean, I truly hope the days of like what Nancy Tremaine went through is over. I hope families rally behind their members that have been vocal these years and thought of as crazy or loony, or I don't want experiencers to continue to think that they're going to end up being some sort of lab rat, and
go ahead, Nicole.
I was going to say, I think with the pop culture influence of our community, our children are already more accepting of this than ever before. So it's like this next reboot of the narrative that we're shaping is already being accepted by the youngest in our communities and in the general population. It's almost like their space race to the moon. They want answers to this, and they believe it. They think we can get answers. There's no reason that we shouldn't be able to,
Victor, I want to talk to you about the history of UFOs in Canada, going back to the research of Wilbur Smith and leading up to today. And I mentioned to Larry Maguire regarding the history that Canada has in UFO reporting and detailing and researching. It's been impressive. We've also seemed to really been able to hide, up until the Canadian Mint created a couple of coins about them, Shag Harbour, Falcon Lake, and other instances where ufology crept into the mainstream. And both those incidents happened in 1967. So, I mean, the idea behind that this subject is new to Canada or new to politicians is absolutely wrong. But we do have to, in my opinion, bring that history back, much like the Americans have to with Roswell.
Yeah, that's a really good point, David. And the reason that it's salient is that the Canadian history about everything that's happened. You mentioned Shag Harbour, you mentioned Falcon Lake, with a number of other kinds of situations. The Montreal sighting over the hotel, all of these things. That history in itself provides another lens for Canadians to understand that a whole lot of very, very significant things happened in Canada. And we can stand, on the curb and watch the juggernaut of the United States pass by as they manage this issue. And they'll do whatever they do. And Canadians have a way of sort of standing back and watching the parade go by. I think that the history of the Canadian UAP UFO phenomenon is something that we have to join the parade. We have to get out there and begin the kinds of dialogues that have been going on in Germany and in the UK and France, even in South America, the huge history that's there. So we have to join that parade. We have to get out there and become part of that narrative. And as Nicole said, that in order to do that, we have to reshape the narrative. And I think we have to understand, and I think that the magic bullet, as far as I'm concerned, is in fact Wilbert Smith. And what he did when he went down to Washington to talk to people in the embassy and to the science director, I mean, coming back with the fact that, UFOs are real and all the things that he said in that document, that to me is the starting point, or could be the starting point for Transport Canada to admit that, they did that. And once Canadians realized that Transport Canada was responsible for sending this man down there to find out more. And those are the kinds of contexts that the history provides for us. And if you don't have an understanding of history, the Canadian aspect of it right now with respect to this issue, we can't move forward in the proper way. So it's almost like holding up your end of the table if all the legs collapse. I think Canadians have to do that. We have to hold up what's relevant within history in order to understand and move forward into the future, to understand what's really going on. So that's one of the things I think that, you're doing that with your radio program. You are providing an outlet for not only where this thing is going, but where it's been. And I think Canadians who are new to this, who are listening to it right now, who are saying, and the Canadians are doing it all the time. And I speak to these Canadian people, and what they ask me? They ask me, and the way I try to explain it to them is, Victor, how long has this been going on, and why the hell don't I know about it? And that's what journalists are saying to me, the good ones that really want to know. So that really kind of indicates there's a hunger out there to know. So in order for me to explain it, I've got to go back to history to provide the context. So history,
Absolutely.
It provides, it's like a springboard into the next aspect of reshaping the narrative. Because if you don't know the history, you really don't know what's coming in the future. And that's a very, very important part of what I think Larry Maguire is beginning here and that's what, Paul Hellyer tried to do that too. But I think Larry, in his own unique way, could be another I guess extremely important person in Canadian history with respect to getting all of this thing moving and getting questions on the floor of the House of Commons during question period, and asking the Minister of Defense, as she sits in her seat, ask her to stand up and explain what she knows about it, how Sagen was briefed, and what the Transport Canada documents tell us. And why does NORAD say directly from Peterson Air Force Base? Why was their statement to me specifically that the authorization of the fact that 1,800 tracks of interest were captured by NORAD in a 5-year period? Okay, and each year with 75 intercepts each year. Have her explain that. And I've got the document that proves that the commander of NORAD gave that information in an authorized way to me directly in a document. And I've never heard any talk about that at all. So that's part of history, and that has to be explained. And if it's explained and spoken about on the floor of the House of Commons, boy, you're going to get a lot of questions after that.
I think outside of CTV and Saga 960, where we broadcast, and your good friend Richard Sirott broadcasts,
right.
I don't think the Canadian media really understands this entire topic.
Doesn't have a clue.
They don't have a clue. And look, I know before this show, I tweeted major members of the Canadian media who cover politics regarding this. And within 24 hours, Victor, of the U.S. hearings, I did 5 interviews across Canada regarding UFOs. Not one person asked me about Canada. Not one host, not one journalist asked me about the Canadian side of this. It was, I was baffled. You're asking a Canadian host of a Canadian show about what's going on in the US, which is great because that Canadian host kind of knew what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But then you're not even taking the time to turn it around to say, hey, what are Canadian politicians talking about this? Why aren't we talking about it? It could have said, we are.
Mm-hmm.
I had to squeeze it into 4 of the interview. 4. That watch Larry Maguire.
Mm-hmm.
Watch Larry Maguire. Watch Larry Maguire. Victor Vigiani, Nicole Sackage, you guys hold on. We got you for another 30 minutes here on Spaced Out Radio. It's a special show tonight. Larry Maguire was in the first hour, the Member of Parliament for the Conservative Party of Canada, opening up the UAP topic. And then in hour 2, we had Grant Cameron, Sean Cahill, and Victor Vigiani and Nicole Sackage. We're going to continue with them as analysts of Canada's in the UFO conversation now.
Excellent. Excellent.
Oh, yeah.
Good radio, man. Good radio.
So the Ontario elections were today, correct?
No, there are tomorrow, Thursday.
Oh, yeah. Tomorrow.
Well, today. Today. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so I'm going to tip you off. Saga 960 is is holding off on this show until Monday. They want a clear slate to run this show.
Okay.
Because they want to go nuts on Twitter about it. They want to go nuts on their social media.
Yeah.
I'm going to be going on with Richard, with Norm Murray, and with Mark Petroni regarding talking to Maguire. And so they really want to pump it up because that will hopefully, Mississauga's signal bleeds into Toronto.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So they want to try and capture as many listeners on this because this is breaking. It is breaking.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to try and capture as many listeners as possible with this one. So they're going to hold off on that one. But I think it's going to be good because, we tweeted out a lot of people today, man. And I was watching who was doing the retweets, and not a single journalist even hit the like button.
Wow.
Not a single journalist. Like, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really a tragedy. It really, really is. I know. I think I for the life of me, they're far too cautious. Even someone like Daniel Otis, and I respect what he's doing, and I think it's great. And enjoy Melbourne. I think. I just don't think they had the courage to stand up and have some sort of special presentation or get W5 on this or get it on the Current, on CBC. I just don't think these larger media outlets have the courage and tenacity to really manage this thing properly. And this goes back, I guess, to ownership, I suppose. Does Bell not, the carrier, does Bell not care? Does CBC not care? What the hell are they afraid of? I just don't understand it. But I think there will be a time when it will happen. But it's almost like you've got something in your grasp and you don't want to grab it because you're going to have to do so much explaining as to why you didn't do anything about this before. And Canadians are famous for that.
Oh yeah.
Why the secrecy? Why the reluctance to hold back on this issue? So I don't know. I think we're too cautious, I think, as a culture, and maybe that's part of the problem.
Well, I think it also has to do with the fact is, a lot of journalists still think they don't want to be the UFO journalist. They think they're going to wear a lot of egg on their face.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody.
Yeah.
If somebody actually took a look at Ralph Blumenthal, here's a Pulitzer Prize winner who believes this story is going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you need to do.
Yeah. Well, I asked Ralph about that. I've spoken to him many times, 4 or 5 times, and I actually interviewed him on my podcast. And I asked him that. I said, when all of this stuff came forward, all of this new stuff came forward, with the Pentagon Papers and all of that, the way the Washington Post handled it, and you're sitting in the room with the ownership of the New York Times or the ownership of the Washington Post. I'm not talking about journalists here and editors. I'm talking about ownership. And you're sitting down with your major editors, and somebody's got to say, yes, we're going to go with the story. And that's what the Washington Post did with Watergate. Okay. With the owner, who was it, Kathleen, what was her name? Catherine, not coming to me. She was the one who said, yes, let's go for it. Let's go with this. And they let Woodward and Bernstein go with it. And it was the biggest success story of the century with respect to American politics. So somebody at that level has to make a decision. And really, there's nobody at Bell. There's nobody at CTV. There's nobody at Global who have the balls to make that kind of decision at this point. We're still waiting for ownership and the publicists at these major corporations in Canada to really step up and say, oh, listen, let's do this. Let's do this. So
I agree. I agree. And they got to get the stigma out of their head that it's a bad thing. It's a bad story. I want to say a quick thank you to Thomas times 2, Dry Toast, Pix, Obi, Grant times 2, Victor, Cherokee, Sally, Ken, Bob, and Carl for the amazing super chats tonight. Thank you to all the veterans who've tuned us on in and all our regulars. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell. Here we go with the final half hour. We rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Good to have you with us. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I want to remind you that if you missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. For the final time tonight, Nicole Sakic, Victor Vigiani from Zealand Communications, hanging on out, analyzing our first hour of tonight's show, where we had Canadian parliamentarian Larry Maguire from the Conservative Party of Canada, a member of that party and sitting in a riding called Brandon-Souris out of Manitoba, who's really opened up the UFO conversation in Canada, in the political realm of Canada. Let's get that clarified there. And Victor, being from Toronto, Nicole, well, she's like half a Canadian because she hangs out with me, she hangs out with Grant Cameron. And we also want to say a big thank you to Grant Cameron and Sean Cahill for coming on in hour 2 talking about this as well. But Victor, I'm very curious in regards to what Larry was saying, that he was very remiss in saying that we may have videos of UAP over Canadian nuclear energy facilities in Ontario. We know there's cameras there. We know that Larry and his team recently did a tour of Canada's nuclear facilities. What would happen if those videos came out?
Well, let's do it the opposite way. Okay, think of it just for a second in the opposite way. If they were to admit that, first of all, the security around our nuclear installations is the top level. You have to, I mean, any nuclear installation, be it a launch of missiles or even just an energy site, the security around these places is just like it's the top level of security that you could ever imagine. And to say that, or to even think that any one of these facilities, be it in New Brunswick or in Ontario or the one in Quebec, to say that they do not monitor what's going on around the plant on the ground and at a certain level above is absolutely silly. They are in fact monitoring it. So in my estimation, my assessment is they do have the videos of something that was hovering over these installations, be it, at 1,500 feet or, 5,000 feet in the sky. We don't really know. I know when planes make an approach to any airport or even fly within Canadian airspace, they all have legal transponders. They have to have a transponder, and none of from what I understand, none of these craft had a transponder, or anything that they saw had a transponder. Now, I know that because in my Freedom of Information Act, or access to information request to the Canadian government, I got documents that indicated that two F-18s were scrambled at Comox Air Force Base in 2001 to chase 3 UAP, or as they called them, unknown tracks, going out over the prairies, and they were scrambled, and they reached speeds of over 600 miles an hour and still couldn't catch these things. And none of these 3 unknown tracks had any kind of transponder. So to think that what's going on over our nuclear installations is way beyond the purview of the videos of the security installations there is absolutely unthinkable. They do have videos, and I'm still pushing to try to find out if these 2 F-18s actually caught video of these UFOs, because in addition to the 2 F-18s that were tracking these 3 UFOs, a medical evacuation jet, an LR-35, saw these 3 UFOs visually. Okay, and then the last lines in the air traffic control report was CF-18s make contact at 35,000 feet. So we know that within the document. I've got the documents. It's a line by line. So I'm guessing, David, that same thing in one way or another was captured on video over our nuclear facilities. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. So if they release that, if they do in fact release it, or it does come forward either within a committee that Larry can push forward, that will be a big deal. And if we can get those videos out, they will become the Canadian Tic Tac videos. I guarantee it.
Nicole, what would it mean down south if all of a sudden UAP videos started coming out of Canada regarding this? Your mic's on mute.
Honestly, I think it would be more fuel to the fire for possible better videos to come out, like to maybe make up for that terrible one from the cell phone that they showed at the American hearings. Like, I mean,
that was incredible. That was absolutely incredible.
So, Victor, you're talking about this case, though, which have fighter jets involved. And I was reading the chat a little bit earlier. We brought up Falcon Lake and Shag Harbour, and of course Charlie Red Star. But what are like the top, since we like top 5s or top 10s or top 3s, what are the top Canadian cases you think maybe known or in the background that people really should know about and could be game changers, in this international arena?
Can I jump in on this one too?
Yeah, go. Dave, you go first. You go first. I've got to get something. Go ahead.
Victor, I want to ask you a question regarding exactly what Nicole is saying. Mm-hmm. And that is, I still believe 5 years ago, that crash onto that reserve lake in Manitoba was a UAP crash, because the entire Canadian military platoon went out there to cordon off the area, and they were armed. They were armed in Jackhead, Manitoba. Do you believe that was a UFO crash, or do you believe that was a training center or a training mission for the Army at that time?
I think it was a craft of unknown origin. I do. I believe. The reading that I've done on it convinces me that it was not that it was not just some sort of miscellaneous training mishap. I believe that it was a craft of unknown origin. I firmly believe it. I do.
That would be on my list then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With Falcon, obviously Falcon Lake, Shag Harbour, the Montreal lights,
right?
The Prince George lights in 1971, where it kind of lit up like the Phoenix lights in 1997, one at a time in a boomerang shape. That was eyewitnessed by the RCMP. That report is still available online. Oh, goodness.
There's another one that I could mention, and I don't know. I did report this, but I don't think it ever made any kind of impact within, official Department of Defense, documentation. But I'm trying to think back of the year that this happened, because I got a call from Barrie, Ontario, from a nurse. Okay, and I'll tell you the story about it. And the nurse called me, and she was very, very upset. And they lived in Barrie. They both worked at Victoria Hospital in Barrie, Ontario, which is just north of Toronto. And they were coming home. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're driving along a side road in Barrie, going back home after their shift. And all of a sudden, the radio kind of conked out, and they slowed down because one of the nurses who was the passenger in the car, they were driving along a concession road with large pine trees, and she looked out the window and she said, "What the hell is that?" And these pine trees are probably 80 to 90 feet tall. There's huge rows of these things. So they stopped, they got out of the car, and they witnessed a triangle the size of a Walmart building. Okay. Well, she called it was as big as the hospital that I work in. That's what she said. And because Victoria Hospital is a pretty big building, and it was a triangle shape with lights in each vertices, and with a brighter light in the middle. And they both were just scared shitless about this. They had no idea. And she was on the phone after they got home, and she was crying. She was literally crying. So that, to me, because I got a personal confirmation of what these nurses went through, I have to ask myself the question: why would a nurse call me? A nurse, a professional, call me in the middle of the night that I don't know. I have no idea who she was or who she is. I even forget her name. I do have written down someplace. But why would they call me and report an event like that? And that event never got publicized. I tried to report it, but it never got any kind of investigation at all. So that would be my personal number one, in addition to things like Shag Harbour and Falcon Lake and the others.
I think there's a couple more. There's a couple more, Nicole. There is the famous case from Cowichan Valley Hospital on Vancouver Island in the early 1970s, where a UFO was literally hovering right beside the hospital, and a nurse actually walked up to a window as she walked into the patient's room, wondering why there was lights on in there, and looked out the window to see two beings in helmets actually fumbling and bumbling their way to get this craft out of there. And it was witnessed by another couple doctors and nurses as well. That case was very, very intriguing, as well as the case of Karina Sables. Do you know this case, Victor?
No, I did not know this one.
She is from Aldergrove, British Columbia. She has been on numerous television shows. She's been on this show, and she is an experiencer. She felt the need to go outside one night, saw a big black triangle. Her boyfriend saw it at the time. He got scared, walked back into the house. She ended up having missing time. And since then, and this is going on almost 30 years now, since then, she has literally had multiple abductions happening almost a couple times a week. Her children had that happening. Now her grandchildren have it happening. And it's all grays, and it all started with a giant black triangle over Aldergrove, British Columbia. And if for people looking on a map, Aldergrove is literally, if you go to the southern part of Aldergrove, it is right along the border of Sumas, Washington.
And well, that brings this up for me, which I'm loving that you guys are bringing up triangle stories here, because I'm gonna go like this and hold up me and Grant's book, and it was actually making me think of speaking with so many triangle witnesses around the Hudson Valley. And I know there were cases that crossed into Canada from that flap. And I know Grant's Charlie Red Star, was over that border. And you just brought this up with being on the border with Washington. How many, are those the game changer cases in this? Like those ones that the US and Canada share? Because I know Charlie Red Star, like the US side of it is Nebraska. No, which one? But there's all the missile silos and the nuclear tie-in. Same thing with the Hudson Valley. There's, important aspects there, and of course our defense, but yeah. So are those the game changer cases then that could come forward? Or
Well, I think eventually, Nicole, what's going to happen is all of the cases that we're speaking about right now, be they formally reported cases or some of the ones that I've received from my access to information, on all the ones that are in Transport Canada and in Library and Archives Canada, there's 9,500 UFO reports there that no one knew about before I made it known. I believe it was in 1995. I did a press release on it, and people just, it's been there for years. Those reports, those 9,500 were there for years, but no one really paid any attention to them. So I would hope that Larry takes the initiative to go to Library and Archives Canada and look at those 9,500 files. And there's letters there from ministers of defense. There's letters there from civilians to all kinds of military people asking questions about UFOs. So there's a huge amount of documentation, informal documentation and formal, and it's all been declassified. It's all there for you to read, but it's pretty boring reading. And that's one of the reasons why this doesn't get highlighted. It's like reading the telephone book. It's it's one thing after another. It's not really exciting stuff. But if Larry can get some of these 9,500 files out there and get them on the table of a committee, they could spend, months analyzing these things and asking questions and posing the really good questions on the floor of the House of Commons. So the best cases are great, but then the plethora of individual cases that are there is more than enough for the United States to look at us and say, boy, why don't you guys wake up and do more with the files that you've already got rather than depending on Roswell and other U.S. situations, So Larry's going to have some work to do if he wants to really dig deep on this.
That was my plethora. I was like, plethora, heard it.
That is the word of the show. Plethora.
Victor, I'm going to argue with you, though, that those documents and things really aren't that boring. There are nerds out there like me that dig through the Stanton Friedman files, and it's like, it's
no,
it's
my dear,
boring, but it's so good. Like,
no, you're right. I'm being facetious when I say that, because I've done it. I've sat there when I first discovered these 9,500 files. I said, holy smoke. And I started digging through them, and they're all right there. There's,
no, just the number alone. I'm like, yeah.
You go and you start reading them, and it's got, Aunt Martha and Uncle Frank are sitting on their front porch in some, town in Quebec, and they see a light, and, Martha says, what's that? And then they call the police, and it becomes a report. If you keep on reading that over and over again, it gets a little tedious. But in fact, they're never really investigated. Okay. And they never really kind of receive the attention that, for example, the Montreal hotel sighting does, or that the Falcon Lake receives, or that the Shag Harbour receives. So, but it's in the granular aspects of all of these sightings that builds this puzzle that David alluded to earlier. And if we can get those things out into the open and say, okay, each individual case may not be important, but as a collective whole, they provide Canadians with the real possibility of understanding that Canada has a real history about this, and that we have to move forward with an understanding. So, as boring as those things might be, it's important that Canadians understand that that is already there, and we have just as much information as the United States have, in sort of a relative quantitative way. We have just as much in a percentage as the United States does, but we just don't talk about it as often as we really, really should.
Go ahead, Nicole.
I think the boring is what's sort of unifying with this, though. When you go through those archives and large databases like that, like I'm thinking of all the searches I did for green fireballs over 15 years. Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's humbling because you're like, oh, not that special after all. Like, oh, yep, definitely not just some chosen special thing going on. So you move through all of that. And I think more people that even don't have their own sighting, once, like you said, you read kind of the same things over and over again. And then you hear the people, like I call the 45ers, the 35ers, who've been at this for decades. That's where they start seeing the patterns in the stories. And there's your data. That's what, unifies all of us and the community at large and the general population into going, maybe this isn't so weird. Maybe this levels the playing field and more people can accept that this has happened to them. They've seen a light in the sky too. They've experienced this hitchhiker effect from their woo friend. There's a lot of scenarios at play, but I do think that raw data, I love talking about Cheryl and Linda's Pink book. I mean, come on, it's a great book, but it's pretty boring. It's pretty boring. Right. It's the most boring, exciting Pink book out there.
Well, I have, your viewers probably can't see it. I have 115 pages of this kind of stuff. Okay. And it's part of the Freedom of Information request, access to information request that I did back in 2010. And it's just pages and pages and pages. And I go through it and I look at an air traffic control report that actually cites Vladimir Putin's name, who's in a jet over Canada, and the report is that the pilots actually tracked a UFO near the jet that Vladimir Putin was in before his name was mentioned in the air traffic control report. So why is that not a big piece of information? I mean, I don't want to cite his name right now in the current context, but that's the kind of thing that could be a game changer. And there's so many of these files that are sitting around. And when I received this package and I went to Ottawa and the guy handed it to me over the desk, all of these files, and I came home and I sat through it, and then I went through the Library and Archives Canada set of documents. I realized that, my goodness, I could spend the rest of my career reading each one of these files, and maybe that's part of the problem. There's just so much out there, but we have to organize it and look at it as a collective, cohesive whole in order for it to make sense.
Victor Vigiani from Zealand Communications, Nicole Sackage from Spaced Out Radio, author and researcher. Thank you so much on sticking around for hour number 3, analyzing hour number 1 tonight. Member of Parliament Larry Maguire and his quest to bring the UAP conversation into Canada's House of Commons. Historic conversation indeed, and it's going to be amazing to see it continue. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thaw rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone in our chat rooms tonight. YouTube, Twitch, LGAP, Facebook, the Space Travelers Club, and on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio.
I know you're out.
Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us. Because together, my friends,
we own the night.
Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. I know you're out there somewhere. Yes, the Woo Train has docked for the night. But soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night. I know I say it every couple of months, but damn it, I have the best theme song ever.
I love it. It's so hard hitting. I love it.
Oh, it's just awesome. It's awesome. It gets me pumped up each and every time I hear it.
Well, I love it because I'm a drummer, and whoever's playing the drums on that track is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
I
what's
didn't know you were a drummer, Victor.
Yeah. I played in more bands.
I'm adding that to my list.
Yeah, I played in more blues bands than anybody can count.
Well, now I want you and Tom to start a band together, a woo band. Tom plays guitar, you play drums.
Wow.
I'm adding to it.
Yeah.
Come to Vegas. We'll have you perform for SOR Vegas 2023.
Hey, listen, if I can put a band together, count me in.
Well, last year's Vegas or this year's, we had Tom dancing on tables. So.
Oh yeah.
My God. Yeah.
I'm so teasing. Maybe not. Yeah.
No, you were not teasing that at all.
Anyways.
I know he'll hear this in the morning, so it'll be pretty funny.
A handful of pistachios and a glass of Diet Coke. It's amazing what you can get Tom Whitmore to do.
Oh, too funny.
A handful of pistachios.
Don't ask me where that came from.
Oh,
but
God, no.
Awesome.
Oh, my God.
Too fun.
And then occasionally you get one of those pistachios that you just can't crack.
That's true. You throw those away. They're the bad ones.
Or lose a tooth trying.
No way. I fight those ones. I will literally risk my teeth for those ones. My teeth and my fingernails, I will risk. I don't know how many fingernails I've nearly ripped off because of those ones.
How does that happen,
Tell me about it. It's rude. Absolutely rude.
They all the other ones decide to pop open, but every 15th one just
what I do? You know, the little Christmas decoration nutcrackers that you have? I put mine in those. I mean, I know they're made for those large holiday nuts, but I'm like, take that, pistachio. They're too tiny to fit in the pincher ones,
You're right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You can count me in as a holiday nut too. So
perfect.
Anyways,
you guys are my kind of nuts.
It is amazing though that it's like $11 a bag for a bag of pistachios now.
Yeah.
Like when did pistachios all of a sudden become Ray-Ban sunglasses?
No. You have to know where to shop for them because you can find them cheap. Like I know around here, it's so crazy. You can get like a little bag of them for $2 at like the dollar store. I know it's not $1, but it's still only $2. And you have to get them when they first come in or they're gone.
Yeah. And as often as I would want to try, I never buy a bag where they're not in their shells. I don't know why. They're there on the shelf, but there's just something not right about buying pistachios that are not in the shell. I don't know why. I can't figure that one out.
Goddamn Tom Whitmore and his pistachio dance.
Okay, it's 3:00 here. I gotta go.
All right.
Morning.
Thanks, Victor.
Bye,
We'll talk
Have a
soon.
great night. Keep it up, and we can do this again very, very soon. And
Yes.
Yeah. We'll talk soon, buddy.
okay, take care now. Bye-bye. See you
Bye.
next week. Bye.
Victor Vigiani, everyone. The legendary Victor Vigiani. And we'll send you out of here, and we'll say goodnight to you.
You know, I had flashes of some old panel discussions here, you know, that all started kind of around the Wilson documents and all those early days of when are the articles coming out? When is 60 Minutes going to talk about this? You know, that was a lot of fun. It was good. It was good to see Grant, good to see Victor, and
Grant Cameron.
The Mystic Lion popped in.
Mystic Lion was looking solid tonight. He was looking solid. It's like back from Fantasy Island.
Fantasy Mountain, maybe. And honestly, Dave, your first hour with MP Larry Maguire, like, bravo. Like,
thank you.
You didn't let up. He answered a lot of great questions. I think he was very honest with the audience about where he was and where things stood and how he thought things should go forward. And, you know, that's just, you know, it's inspiring. And knowing that more hearings in other countries, it's just, you know, it's happening.
You know, what makes me is how candid he was to actually answer questions. He didn't dodge anything. Like, you know, he dodged a couple of questions, okay, about the prime minister being read in, but that was because he didn't have the proper information. Like, it wasn't like one of those, I can't talk about that, or, you know, or complete correction. It wasn't that way at all.
No, I think he was very cautious of not speculating. So there you
go. When did this show start, James? November 30th, 2014 is when we launched SOR. And hi, Wallet Moth, how you doing? So we've been going 7.5 years strong, my friend, and we're still looking good, just a little grayer. I had dark hair when the show started.
Solid dark or salt and peppery dark?
It was salt and peppery dark at the time.
There you go. It's time for new headshots then.
I actually, get this. I actually called my hairstylist. I was going to go get a cut tomorrow. Okay, I was. And she says to me, I can't get you in until the end of June. I said, you're sounding like my fucking doctor's office. Pardon my language.
I mean, isn't that kind of standard?
I'm not. I said, yeah, I don't wait until June. Sorry. So tomorrow.
You only have one person you go to anyways? Like, doesn't everybody just have like 3 that they interchange?
Hold on. Reports.
Can I tell you a secret? I cut my own hair, so I don't have to deal with that kind of garbage.
I was going to take off like 4 or 5 inches of hair, dude.
I don't know. What's the worst that could happen? That's what I tell myself all the time. No one's ever going to know.
Yeah.
I say all the time, it's like once every 4 years I cut my own hair. So
hold on a second here. Look at this BS from Andrew Fricker in the chat room. I'm 57, Dave, and my hair is better than yours. Hold on a second here. Where is Andrew Fricker? On Facebook.
Oh, pull it up. Let's see.
We're gonna have a little.
The best hair I've seen on Spaced Out Radio, top 3 over the last month. Okay, Cahill, Jimmy Church, and Nicholas Shaughnessy.
Geraldine
Maine.
Geraldine Orozco brings some strong.
No, she's the gold bar standard. Like, she's already the reigning champ of best spaced out radio goddess hair ever. So no one else can even contend.
Andrew, chicken. You're chicken. You can't even post one on your own Facebook, you dirty bastard.
Oh, were you creeping?
I'm totally creeping right now. I'm looking.
Who else are we going to Facebook creep?
Hold on. I'm going to find him here. By the way, Kristen Payton tomorrow night. We are talking monsters and Sasquatch. There's him playing guitar, bald. There is nothing that says I am that your hair is better than mine. You're bald in your photos. It's terrible. Hey, Almenial, how you doing? How many different YouTube names do you have, man? Holy cow. Dude is like solid on them. All right, this is number 4. I got to continue editing here. Gosh. Where did Victor say shitless?
I didn't even register that. What?
I register everything. I think this is it. Hold on. With 1 minute to go, Grant, you think we're going to see hearings in Canada? Oh, Grant Cameron, go find me.
I don't know. I was waiting for Maguire to say that. It kept going.
Where's my wallet?
Where's my wallet?
I'm so sending him a check for a rock. I love buying rocks.
Who was in the Spaced Out Radio says, I love when Victor calls Dave David. Who was in here typing that?
I said that. Did I put it in the private chat?
No, you put it in the public chat under Spaced Out Radio because you're logged in.
Oh, well, I did that a few times. I thought people thought it was me, so I'm sorry.
Oh, that's funny.
That is funny.
Whatever you want. Whatever you want.
I didn't realize that was me. I thought it would be my own.
No.
So when I do the private chat and then type in that, does that say
you have to go on YouTube, but if you type it in StreamYard, you're going to come out as Spaced Out Radio.
Oh, see, I learn something every day.
That's why we love you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I apologize if Dave was cracking some funny ones tonight. No, it wasn't anything bad. I threw up some emojis, love and light, rock horns. All right, I'm going to bed. I have to report to the restaurant tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm just going to continue. I'm almost done editing here.
It's
15. Good job tonight, kiddo.
Oh, kiddo. You good job. Way to bring it. Good panel. Great first hour guest.
We brought it hard.
You know, you're such a Canadian patriot fighting the good cause for phenomenology.
Hey, I even wore a collared shirt for this one.
Number 1.
I wore a collared shirt for this one.
I'm proud of you.
I will be back in a t-shirt tomorrow night.
I can hear Don Schmidt's red tie clapping for your button-up shirt.
coast right now. You can fall asleep to little Donnie Schmidt and his power goatee
and red tie. All right, guys. Thank you, YouTube. Thank you. Where else are we on? Facebook, terrestrial radio, Spotify, Twitter, Twitterverse, all my pals. Good night. Bye, Dave. Good job.
Tomorrow. Good night, Nicole Sakic.
I can never hang up. You should just kick me out.
She kicked herself out. Weirdo. Oh, that's good stuff. Bad cop, no donut. How you doing, man? Good to see you back. Will you be uploading the Apple today? I got to figure out what's going on there, because Spreaker normally sends us to Apple, so I'm not sure what is happening here. I got to figure that out. We will. I just found out about this tonight, so I don't know. Oh, wrong one. Oh, Joe, your hair is looking great. Dave is tired. Dave is tired. Cool. Let's see, where are we here? Hi, gorgeous D Swagger. You're welcome, sensational Shelley. Okay, I will be right back. I'm going to go for a quick bathroom break. So, Oob, you've got control of the chat room. Ow. right. How we all doing? We had a pretty good night here, guys. We got some history on SOR tonight. We sure did. I'm so happy that all of you were here to hear it. Hi, Eddie Petch. How you doing? La Pantera Coladerosa. It's not a man bun. VW Blue Sky. How you doing, man? I am very happy with the way tonight went. Very happy. Okay, so I see it blurs out when I'm downloading everything together. So that's what happens. Okay, it'll be clear in a couple of minutes, guys. Okay. Now we learned something. Almost done the one. It's me, the Colonel. What did I miss? Oh, hey, Clam. There's one done. Should be getting clearer. 2 done. Should be getting clearer. Oh, right on, Aussie. Yeah, Allison from Adelaide Haunted Horizons was awesome. She really was. Loved her. Oh, very cool. You told her that you heard her on our show. That is great. Thanks for doing that. Wallet Moth, anytime, man. Love performing for you guys. Love it. Dogman Conference in Tennessee. That sounds cool. I would like to attend that. There's no man bun there. It is a ponytail. No, a man bun is not being seen, nor is it ever being seen on SOR. Music. Is this why your radio station seems to not work sometimes? You have fuck all to say. You mean like right now? I'm editing the radio show for our radio stations. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I talked a lot tonight. Where the hell did that go? Oh, right there. Yes, right now I've listened to a UFO radio, which you're on. You sound a heap younger on the radio only. Oh my goodness. It's the winters up here, man. It's the winters. Hold on, I can't see. Yeah. Now I can see. I don't have any delay problems. And my PC is bare bones. Dave has the man bun face for radio. Damn you, Andrew. I hope you break a string. See if I can find a picture of FAP tonight. Here's a picture of FAP. Could land a helicopter on his head. Right here. Go flat top. I'll get it checked out, music. All right. Downloading is done. Tomorrow night on the show, we have Kristen Payton coming on to talk some monsters and her quest for finding out what Sasquatch is. She had a sighting as a kid, and she's been looking for the damn thing ever since. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. I'm going to try and write up an article on this show for tomorrow and see where we go with it. So that is what we are up to. That is what we are doing. So I will say good night to all of you. Thank you for making tonight a major success. I think you should get a secondary PC and use it as a slave. Downloads. I have 2 computers moving right now. Music. Hit me up on DM on Facebook or Twitter or something along those lines. I'd be curious to chat with you. Yeah. That'd be cool. All right, guys. Say goodnight. Kristen Payton tomorrow night. Thank you so much to all of our new subscribers, all of our veterans who are tuning on in, all of our regulars, And our super chatters tonight, Sally, Ken, Bob, Carl, Grant times 2, Cherokee, Victor, Obi, Pix, Thomas times 2, and Dry Toast. We'll see you all tomorrow night, everybody.